A Bullet in the Ballet by Caryl Brahms and S.J. Simon. Abridged and read by David Rumelle. A Bullet in the Ballet, Episode 1. In the mid-1930s, the ballet Stroganoff is opening its London season with a performance of Stravinsky's ballet Petrushka.
Since it's probable that any book flying a bullet in its title is going to produce a corpse sooner or later, here it is. Dressed somewhat extravagantly in trousers of red and yellow check, its white jumper is scarlet with scarlet and jade. It wears a yellow bouffant wig, a Russian clown's hat and undertaker's gloves. It is bending over the top of a booth, its arms swinging limply over the sides. There is a neat little bullet hole in the centre of its forehead. It died magnificently in the presence of 2,000 people, most of whom had paid for their seats. Petrushka. And on this occasion, none other than the famous dancer Anton Palouk. Palouk had danced energetically and must have been very annoyed when the bullet robbed him of his curtain calls. 6 under contract. At any rate, Vladimir Stroganoff, though still alive, was definitely furious. For the past 2 years he had jerked his company safely, if hysterically, through Australia, Harbin, the Gold Coast and Chicago, and here, on the opening night of his London season, they had gone and bumped off his leading dancer. It was not that he felt any particular affection for Palouk. In fact, privately, he was inclined to think that Palouk had been asking for it for years, but good Petrushkas were scarce. If it had been Ernest Smithsky now, who mimed his way so conscientiously through Lac des Cygnes, or Stanley Simpson, his indispensable secretary. But they'd picked on Anton, and Petrushka was in the bill again on Wednesday week, and it could not be taken out on Wednesday week, for this was to be a gala performance in honour of Benoit's birthday. And even though the veteran had declared that nothing would induce him to come over to see Palouk, he, who had seen Nijinsky, Boylm, Wojtkowski, this had been suppressed, and all society had promised to be present. Stroganoff scowled furiously at the clustering stage. "Moves the body," he commanded. "Evite, take it away, forget it, prepare the next scene." Fortunately, the audience had no idea what had occurred. The stage manager had rung down the curtain with commendable promptitude, and what's more, kept it down. The more determined of the company, unaware of the disaster, cursed him in a variety of languages and pushed their way to the front of the curtain. The gallery clamoured for Petrushka. Stroganoff, with what he afterwards insisted on describing as great presence of mind, tripped over the tassels to announce that Palouk had suddenly been taken ill. Gradually the clamour subsided to a sympathetic murmur, and the audience trickled out into the foyer. "I'm simply frantic about Anton," said the man with the flaccid mouth. "Simply frantic, my dear. He must be frightfully ill to miss his curtains." "Dying, I would imagine," observed his companion dryly. He'd known Anton for 11 years, and the nearest the lad had come to ever missing a curtain call was when the theatre caught fire in Santiago, and he'd had to make do with 3. "A poor performance, I thought," observed the second critic. "The death scene was singularly unconvincing." "And his passion for the doll distinctly lukewarm," said the girl who knew everybody. "It is," announced the man who knew everything. Outside, the stage doorkeeper was fast losing his patience. The clamouring mob around him did not seem to understand plain English. "No," he said for the 105th time, "you can't see Mr. Palouk." "I've got an appointment. I always see Anton after a performance. We want to know how dear Anton is." "He's dead," said the stage doorkeeper, his patience evaporating. He regretted it immediately, as half a dozen determined critics pushed their way past him and started fighting for his telephone. But the show must go on. This is unfortunate, as the next ballet is by that advanced choreographer Nivashno, and depicts Ajax laboriously wrestling with the lightning to Tchaikovsky's 1812. So, though poor Anton is in his dressing room, together with a balletto medico, who for once has found no difficulty in diagnosing the cause of death, Stroganoff and his secretary Stanley Simpson, the audience are back in their seats, and the curtain has been rung up on a miscellaneous collection of rocks. But though the critics must stay and watch, we're under no such obligation. The flying squad tourer pulled up outside the Collodium Theatre and disgorged its occupants. These consisted of 2 police photographers, a police surgeon, Detective Sergeant Banner, and Detective Inspector Adam Quill. The first thing you notice about the inspector is his height, which is 6'3". The second, his good looks, which are those of the matinee idol stamp, lacking only the practised profile that distinguishes the latter. Fair-haired, a good-humoured mouth, large, capable hands, and an unemotional manner. Not supernaturally intelligent, but then not naturally stupid. He is not altogether without experience. This is his second big case since his inspectorship. In the first, he arrested the wrong man, and this time he's determined to be more careful. He's not a man much given to advanced speculation, but judging from the cold, precise message received over the phone from the theatre manager, it does not seem to him that this case will present many difficulties. From what little he knew of the stage, actors were a jumpy crowd, and it should be a matter of mere routine to discover a suspect to fill the 3 cardinal clauses in the detective's handbook: means, motive, opportunity. As likely as not, he reflected, he'd be greeted by some hysterical young woman already in the throes of repentance. But he was in fact greeted by the stage doorkeeper, who refused to let him in. Fortunately, Stroganoff appeared in time. "Oh, poor Anton! He's in his dressing room for the last time." Quill looked up sharply. "I thought he was shot on the stage." "On the roof. It was lucky," he added, "that it was the end of the ballet, so the audience they know nothing and are happy." "Then you move the body?" "Mais naturellement," said Stroganoff. "You cannot have a body in Ajax. And anyway, the decor, it is different." "Am I to understand," asked the persevering Quill, "that you have moved the body and calmly gone on with the performance?" "Mais certainement," said Stroganoff with evident self-satisfaction. "We are well organized, yes." "But were you not aware," asked Quill coldly, "in England the police like to see everything it was at the time of the event, and now this is no longer possible?" "Mais oui," beamed Stroganoff. "Pour nous tout est possible. All will be put back on Wednesday week." This was too much for Quill. "Wednesday week? Sure, we get Petrushka again then for Benoit himself. The who shall dance Petrushka now that Antony's dead, I cannot decide. Pavel Bunia, perhaps, but then maybe he's too young, no?" "No," agreed Quill involuntarily. "But you wish to see poor Anton, yes? I will take you. He's in his dressing room, the star's dressing room. It was in his contract. I will give it now to Pavel, and if Rubinska's mother, she is angry, poof, that does not matter." Accompanied by his photographers, the police surgeon and Sergeant Banner, the latter reluctantly detached from his fascinated study of Ajax's defiance, Quill followed Stroganoff up the stairs and into the dressing room. The dressing table revealed the usual assortment of dirty towels, cold creams, mascara, rouge, and false eyelashes. The golden sylphides wig, due to be worn at tomorrow's performance, was already laid out, awaiting the wig groomer's attention. But readers are asked to suppress their gulps in their throats. They did not see Palluque's sylphides. It was horrible. On the sofa, nonchalantly covered by a Spanish shawl, tricorn, lay the body of the dancer. The fair-haired young man who'd been sitting on the chair beside it sprang to his feet as the procession entered. "Stanley," said Stroganoff sharply, "why are you not in the box watching the performance for me? Go away. You must not interfere with the inspector who has come to arrange an assassin for us." Quill quite liked this novel angle on his duties, but as his staff seemed to be enjoying it too, he suppressed his smile and walked over to the sofa. "Where," he inquired, "is the doctor who examined the body?" "Gone back to see the ballet," volunteered Stanley Simpson. "Stalls, 11th row side. I made a point of inquiring in case you wanted him," he added with evident self-pride. "Call him," said Quill. Stroganoff was delighted to see Stanley go. He was always delighted to see Stanley go. Stanley had no vision, only a head for figures, and figures were easily the most unpleasant factor in Stroganoff's life. Sunnily he turned to the inspector. "You have everything, yes? Then I go to rub up my speech." "Just a moment," said Quill. He turned to the police surgeon, who by this time completed his examination. "Perfectly straightforward," said the latter. "Shot at the range of about 10 yards or over. Death instantaneous. Suppose you want the bullet, so let's take the body away and get on with it." Quill nodded, and the body was duly carried off, though not without a howl of protest from Stroganoff, who argued that he needed the corpse's costume for the next presentation. By this time, Quill had an uneasy feeling that the proceedings were not going to be as straightforward as he supposed. As yet, he had but the vaguest idea of the setting of the crime, He knew that it had taken place on the stage towards the end of a ballet called Petrushka, and that the victim was on some sort of roof. Why or how he had yet to ascertain. He'd been shot in full view of the audience, but the range of the shot eliminated the further parts of the house, and it seemed unlikely that anyone in the stalls or circle could pull a gun and get away with it. There remained the boxes, the orchestra, the wings, and possibly the stage itself, assuming the scenic structure permitted. He would get that scene reset sometime, and before Wednesday week at that. Manfully, he set himself to discover further details. This took rather a long time, for at first Stroganoff flatly refused to believe that Quill did not know Petrushka intimately, and when finally convinced, showed a strong tendency to take him through the ballet step by step. In this he was energetically assisted by the balletto medico, who'd arrived with a heated criticism of Ajax on his lips, and appeared only too eager to lay his 40 years of ballet-going experience at a detective's feet. At the end of 20 minutes, Quill began to collect a hazy impression that Paluk had thoroughly deserved to be murdered, if only because he was no Nijinsky. Somehow he managed to gather that Paluk had died at the moment when Petrushka dies in the ballet. He'd been standing on some sort of a roof. The stage, save for some sort of a magician, was deserted, but a few minutes previously it had been overflowing with the entire cast, plus a large number of extras. Paluk had been standing centre stage in full view of the audience. No shot had been heard, which argued a silencer, and as the position stood, any one of about 200 people might have done it. "But," finished Stroganoff, "you will see for yourself what a good work it is. You're lucky, lucky man. What an ecstasy that is coming for you. It is arranged then that you come to my box on Wednesday week, and afterwards," he added, as one conferring a great honour, "I introduce you to Rubinska." "I'm afraid," said Quill apologetically, "I shall have to see it before Wednesday week. In fact, I would like you to reenact the scene for me at once, just as it was at the time of the performance, with everybody who was on the stage then on the stage now." "Pardon?" said Stroganoff. At the fourth time Stroganoff understood. "Impossible," he said in triumph. "First there is Paluk. He is dead. One of my men will substitute for him." "But it is all bien compliqué," protested Stroganoff. "No policewoman will be able to dance it, even if he could learn quick enough." "But my company is tired," said Stroganoff. "Come tomorrow and all should be prepared. Mais moi, je ne vois pas la nécessité." "It is very necessary," said Quill, "and I prefer to see it now." "Tomorrow, at 12, said Stroganoff firmly. "And even so it is a great favour I do you, for we should at moment rehearse Giselle." "You would not come to Giselle instead? No, it is very beautiful." But Quill was spared the embarrassment of an answer by the appearance of Stanley, who announced that Ajax was over, and that the audience, while not exactly clamouring for Stroganoff, were nevertheless making sufficient noises to warrant his appearance before the curtain. "Oh, I come," said Stroganoff. "I have a speech to make." In the wings, the fascinated Sergeant Banner edged his way through and ranged himself behind his superior. This was life. As Quill listened to Stroganoff's lyrical improvisations, from which the only fact to emerge clearly was that this night was the greatest night Ballet had ever known and would ever know until Wednesday week, Quill found himself wondering uneasily where his next step in this mad world would lead him.
Episode 2. On the opening night of its London season, the ballet Stroganoff is stunned by the murder of its leading dancer, shot in the title role of Petrushka.
It was perhaps as well that Paluk could not remain alive to read his own obituaries, for he would not have been at all pleased with the manner in which they were framed. They merely dragged up the matter of his 3 unsuccessful marriages, and the 7 times he'd walked out on Anne crawled back to Stroganoff. Not an entrechat, not a cabriole, not so much as one of his 6 magnificent turns mentioned. But even though the world at large did not seem unduly perturbed by a chattering loss, up in the classrooms at the Collodium Theatre, everybody was in tears. 26 dancers in the corps de ballet, 15 mothers, 3 fathers, 12 small-part dancers, and 6 ballerinas were all refusing to lend each other handkerchiefs. There was Stroganoff edging away from Stanley, and finally there was Arienskaya, ex-ballerina to the Mariinsky Theatre, ex-mistress to Anton Paluk, director of classes to the Stroganoff Ballet, and sole dictator to her husband, P. Boutique. Shriveled but arrogant, she's sitting upright in a gilded chair, from good-humoured ladies, presiding over the mourners. One hand is using Stanley's handkerchief to wipe her eyes, the other eluding the sympathetic pats her husband is endeavouring to administer. "Laissez-moi," she says. "I am inconsolable. I want nothing. Go and fetch my bag that in my distress I left on Stroganoff's table, my cigarettes which are in my dressing room, and my shawl which I left at home. I am freezing." P. Boutique, premier dancer to the Mariinsky Theatre, and principal walker-on to the Stroganoff Company, ambled happily off. "Her shawl," he mumbled, "her cigarettes, and something else which I'll remember later." Pavel Bunia bumped into him in the doorway. Pavel presented a languid cheek to Stroganoff and the backing Stanley, and sauntered towards Arienskaya. "Poor Anton," he sighed. "Terrible, I assure you. I did not shut my eyes all night. Little did I think when we come to London and it should be I who would dance Petrushka." Half a dozen heads jerked up sharply at this statement, among them Kasia Ranievsky, a newcomer to the company who had hoped vaguely that he might secure this distinction. Noticing his depression, Arienskaya beckoned him over, but not, as it transpired, to offer consolation. "Where," she asked, "is Rubinska this morning? She's a bad girl. Last night in Petrushka she was 4 beats late with her entrance, and for why?" I'm afraid," said Kasia, "that was my fault." "Of course it is your fault. That is what I'm saying." "Your whisper in the wings," interposed Stroganoff, "and poof, she is late. Do not do it no more." He dismissed the man airily and bent over Arienskaya. "Ma belle," he said, "presently there comes a young man who has never seen Petrushka, but a good boy quand même. He is from the police and will catch our assassin. This man will surely ask you many questions." "The police, they always ask questions," nodded Arienskaya. "But this time I am not afraid. My passport, it is perfect." "Excuse me," interposed Stanley, "but I think you've got the wrong idea of the sort of questions the police are going to ask. They'll be looking for a motive. That means they want to probe into Anton's life, his friends, his enemies, his affairs." "But of course," agreed Arienskaya. "Me, I will tell him how cleverly I seduced Anton 10 years ago." "Bof," said Stroganoff, "they will not be interested." "Mais c'était très intéressant," protested Arienskaya. "But look, he did not want. He mauvais sujet. Havelock Ellis, he have chapter about it." Stanley blushed. He could never get quite accustomed to these franknesses, though he came up against them on an average 50 times a day. "It is time to start the class," agreed Arienskaya. She rose and clapped her hands imperiously. The pianist struck a weary chord, and scuffling started. The Paluk was dead, was no longer important. Meanwhile, Quill at his breakfast table gazed with revulsion at a plate of cold cereals, and wondered why he, who faced cutthroats, blackmailers, and conmen unflinchingly, should lack the courage to give in the notice to his landlady, Miss Treacle. In front of him was spread the accumulated data of the crime, acquired with superhuman pertinacity the previous evening. Addresses of the company. Though everybody knew with whom everybody else was living, they were all very vague as to where they were doing it. Altogether an exhausting evening. Still, he had made some progress. The full medical report would be in his hand shortly, and he was due to witness the reconstruction of the last act this morning. After that, it ought to be a straightforward matter of docketing the data and sifting the evidence. Grimly, he rose to his feet, buckled on his raincoat, and strode out. Upstairs in the classroom at the Collodium Theatre, feeling uncommonly clumsy in the face of so much precarious balance, Quill edged his way over to Stroganoff and tapped him on the shoulder. "Go there," said Stroganoff absently. He thought it was Stanley. But Arienskaya, catching sight of the good-looking young man, stopped the class and came towards him with a slow but very determined gait. "I am Arienskaya," she announced. "Meet me." "Ah," beamed Stroganoff, "it is a nice young man who has never seen Petrushka. You have slept well, no?" "I did not close an eye," declared Arienskaya. "First there was poor Anton, and then there was my husband who would keep on talking. Ah, here he comes, the villain," she added, as Perchik came hurrying in with a cushion, a small valise, and a footstool. "And
dish you bring? What is it? I did not ask for these things. Oh, we go to my dressing room while my husband takes the class. He's a good teacher, smiled Arienskaya, as she propelled Quill through the door. Not as good as me, but still good. She threw open the door of her room. Now, we have a nice little chat while Stroganoff he go down and prepare the stage. Alone with Arienskaya, Quill began to feel more normal. He was about to interrogate a witness, which, as every reader of detection is aware, is the groundworks of any murder case. The first rule was to put the witness at ease, but it was early evident that this would not be necessary. Already Arienskaya was seated in a chair and was waving him to another. "Now," she said comfortably, "you tell me all about it." Quill remembered the second rule. Let the witness talk. This witness needed very little encouragement. "Paluk, he lived with Pavel. It is disgusting that he still like men after I go to all that trouble to seduce him." Quill pricked up his ears. "You were in love with him?" "Me," said the astonished Arienskaya. "But no, we sleep a little, that is all. Me, I only love my husband." "And did your husband know of this, liaison?" "But of course he know. Everybody know. My husband tell me himself it would be no good. But I do not listen." But perhaps his husband was not as complacent as Arienskaya made him out. Had he stumbled on a possible motive? "And when did this happen?" "Oh, it is now 10 years. You must understand I am now old. I do not have many lovers now. But at your age it was different." Rule 5. Keep the witness to the point. "Where," he asked firmly, "were you at the time of the murder?" "In my box," said Arienskaya, "with Stroganoff. No, Stroganoff leave before the end." "Then you saw Paluk die?" "Yes, and for once he died beautifully, right in the middle of the beat." "Did his death strike you in any way unusual?" "But very unusual. As a rule, Paluk he died 2 beats too late. But me, I thought it was a fluke. It was only afterwards I realized that someone shoots him in good time." "Who told you?" Arienskaya reflected. "It was Rubinska, I think. Yes, I'm sure. She was crying when I went to her room to tell her how bad she danced. I asked her what is the matter. Oh, I am soft-hearted, moi. And she told me that Paluk was shot." "And how did she know?" Arienskaya shrugged. "Maybe she shoot him. Who knows?" "Would she have any reason to shoot him?" "We Russians, we do not need a reason," declared Arienskaya. "She loved him, that is plenty, and Paluk, he no longer love her. That is more than too much." Quill could almost feel the textbook nodding approvingly. He had left her for another woman. "Pas exactement, but he left her." Quill felt he had stood all he could digest from this witness for the moment, and was relieved when Stanley's eager face popped round the door to announce that the stage was ready. Out in the house, the stalls, under their dust covers, stretched wearily across the auditorium like the dead waves of a white sea. It's almost a shock in this vast wilderness to see Stroganoff's amiable dome, bald and shining. Beside him, Arienskaya's nothing more than a loud voice in a twisted shadow. Quill and the fascinated Sergeant Banner, the latter firmly planted in the front row, complete the effect. The curtain has just gone up on the noise and bustle of the last act of Petrushka, the ballet of 3 puppets. Petrushka, a traditional Russian clown, the Moor, his richly attired rival, and the doll for whose affections they compete. These are the tragic triangle that an old showman, the charlatan, he is coldly called on the programme, has, by means of his enchantments, brought to life. Quill had the strained expression of a man who is trying to absorb everything at once. This was awful. Not a square inch of the stage had had its gyrating occupant, and none of them seemed to gyrate in one place for long. From the balconies, gypsies waved and mouthed, handsome Russian women cavorted gaily, the crowd pushed and jostled. Snow began to fall, and the curtains of the puppet booth running almost the length of the stage were agitated, as though by a hurricane. From them burst the affrighted doll, the Moor, scimitar raised on high, and a wizened Petrushka, ambling furiously around the stage like a bumblebee in a hurry. "Mon Dieu!" Arienska's shrill voice almost drowned the miscellaneous noises in the orchestra. "It is my husband! Why?"
Stroganoff, holding her forcibly in her seat with one hand, explained with the other that this was at Pachik's own request.
The old one is always asking me to allow him to dance Petrushka, and today it costs nothing to give him that pleasure. Meanwhile, the Moor, unable to postpone catching this rather laggard Petrushka any longer, had killed him several bars too early, and had now advanced to the footlights to reason with the conductor. "You," he said, "you never look at the stage, and if you did it would make no difference." "You," retorted the conductor, "cannot count 9 in the bar when you hear them." The Moor burst into what sounded to Quill like Arabic. Actually, it was Russian. The conductor, an unsubtle soul, called the Moor a bastard. Like a billiard ball, Stroganoff shot from his seat, gathered momentum down the gangway, and grasped the conductor urgently by his hair. "Through you I was estranged from poor Anton, and now you wish to lose me, my Pavel? You watch your stage, and you take your time from them, you hear? And afterwards you are sacked. I have a man here who has never seen Petrushka, and this is the effect you show him." And meanwhile, the dead Petrushka had risen unseen behind the crowd that clustered in front of him, and was being helped up a ladder backstage that led to the top of the booth, where his spirit was due to appear. The ballet went on. To a quieter rhythm, the stage was cleared of its multitudes, till there was only the magician dragging the lifeless effigy of the puppet Petrushka across the sawdust. The squeal of the oboe shot through the air, mouthing Petrushka's death agony for him. Immediately, Putik bobbed up on the roof, waved his arm furiously at Quill, twisted his head frantically in all directions, and finally collapsed in mock death. "Excuse me," Quill asked Stroganoff, "but did Paluk move his head like that in the part?" "Not like that," said Stroganoff, shocked. "Much better." This was disappointing, as a twisted head meant that it would be difficult to fix the direction from which the shot had been fired with any certainty. Nevertheless, the reconstruction had served its purpose. There were not many places around the stage where the murderer could have concealed himself to fire unseen at his target. The balconies on each side of the stage were the most probable of them. They'd been crowded with performers during most of the ballet, and if one of them had elected to stay behind, he had better examine the balconies at closer quarters. As Quill expected, the ledge offered an excellent hiding place for a murderer. Crouched behind it, the person was completely concealed from the wings and stage. He tested this for himself. Detective's Handbook, Rule 27. "You are droll," said Stroganoff, amused. "In the performance, the lighting is different. Anyway, no one would want to look while Petrushka die." Quill felt inclined to agree. If the murderer had indeed selected this spot, the chances were that he had remained unobserved. Quill completed his inspection up on the roof, where Petrushka had died. But beyond a few bloodstains, there was nothing to learn. "Lunch?" asked Stroganoff hungrily. Quill excused himself. He was planning a quiet hour of recuperation at a neighbouring pub. He wanted a rest from Stroganoff.
Episode 3. Investigating the murder of the ballet Stroganoff's leading dancer, Inspector Quill becomes further involved in the company's bizarre lifestyles.
Quill sat over his after-lunch coffee, trying to sort the miscellany of information that he had thrust upon him into some sort of order. The situation recorded in his notebook now stood as follows. Paluk had been killed by a revolver fired at the climax of the ballet Petrushka when all eyes would have been on the stage, most likely from one of the 2 balconies on the left and right of stage. Motive for murder. According to Stanley, there is an abundance of motives. Paluk appears to have been the best-hated man in the company. Investigate the following. Stroganoff. Paluk was about to form a rival company under auspices of Lord Buttonhook, taking Stroganoff's best dancers. This presumably would mean ruin, therefore ample motive. Check S's movements at time. Rubinska, jilted by Paluk, danced doll in Petrushka, found by Arienskaya shortly after murder in dressing room, very distressed and with full knowledge of events. How did she know? Kasha Ranievsky, in love with Rubinska and growing intimacy with Paluk, possibly assumed, danced coachman in Petrushka. Pavel, pervert, danced more in Petrushka, apparently second best-hated man in company, intimate with Paluk, but objects to growing friendship between Paluk and Kasha. Leaves stage after first death of Petrushka before the end of the ballet. Subsequent movements unknown. Find out. Serge Appelsin, dresser and intimate of Pavel, thrown over by Pavel in favour of Paluk. Furiously jealous. Movements at time of crime unknown. Inquire. Arienskaya, former mistress of Paluk, claims her husband did not mind. Probably correct, but P. Putik, husband of Arienskaya, once famous dancer, walker on in Petrushka, and on Stanley's list as one of the people on left-hand balcony in scene. Question on subject of wife's infidelity and try to gather real feelings. Volti subito conductor, bad terms with Paluk, motive hardly adequate, but Stanley hints maybe other and better grievances. First-class shot. Opportunity to shoot unobserved unlikely, but just possible as all eyes are on the stage. On the whole, Quill was fairly satisfied with the morning's work. He had to interview the people on his list and confirm and expand the information in his possession. He called for his bill. Back at the theatre, Quill asked for Pavel and was directed to his dressing room. Quill knocked. "Ah, Mr. Inspector, it is nice of you to call." Pavel, revolting in the resplendent dressing gown, gushed a welcome. Behind him, a tall, bullet-headed man with slanting eyes and high cheekbones stood in non-committal silence. This, thought Quill, must be Serge Appelsin, the jealous dresser. "Make yourself comfortable," fawned Pavel. "Whiskey and soda?" "There is no soda," said Serge grimly, "or whiskey." "Never mind," said Pavel. "We will make you Russian tea instead. Serge, the kettle." Pavel sighed. "Oh, Paluk, he was my best friend. But do not let him hear." He pointed to Appelsin, who had retreated to the wardrobe. "He is jealous, that one." "Quite," said Quill. "What an artist," said Pavel. "What a dancer. His death is a loss irreparable to the company. It is true that I shall dance Petrushka as well as he, maybe a little better, but who now shall dance the Moor?" What would Stroganoff say to this? Quill found himself thinking. There was only one answer. "Poof," he said experimentally. The effect was electrical. In an instant all Pavel's amiability had departed. He leapt to his feet, livid and quivering, while Appelsin leapt and quivered beside him. "The Moor," said Pavel, "is the most difficult role in the ballet." "Every educated person knows that," said Serge. "He is symbolic." "He has a scene all to himself." "And a pas de deux." "He is subtle. He must depict passion. There is no one in the company except Pavel subtle enough to take him." That seemed to be that. Quill offered his cigarettes, but his gaspers were scornfully waved to one side. "I would like," said Quill, "to ask you a few questions about the time Paluk died." The two men glanced at each other. "Alas," they said in union, "we know nothing." Quill assured them it was a matter of mere routine. In the case of murder, he had to question everybody. "When you left the stage yesterday," he asked Pavel, "where did you go?" Pavel pondered. "I stand in the wings to take my curtain." "Curtains," corrected Appelsin. "The left or the right wing?" "The right." "And did you take your curtains?" Pavel pondered again, and to Quill he seemed a little uneasy. "Certainement," he said at last. "Then presumably you did not hear that Paluk had been shot till later." "Much later," agreed Pavel. "As a matter of form," said Quill, "did anybody see you standing in the wings?" "Mais oui," said Appelsin. "I was with him. I wait with him with the dressing gown." "This dressing gown," said Pavel proudly. "Who else was near you?" Neither of them could remember. There were many people in the wings at the end of Petrushka, but they were of no interest. Quill persisted, but neither Pavel nor Appelsin could remember. The pair ushered him out with solicitude, but to Quill there seemed a certain amount of relief in their bearing at his departure. Quill's next call was on Stroganoff. "Ah," he beamed at Quill, "the man who has never seen Petrushka."
Whiskey and soda? Asked Stroganoff, but there was no whiskey, only Russian tea. Quill refused firmly. Stroganoff was sorry and poured himself out an enormous glass. And our assassin? He asked cosily. You have found him, no? We're doing our best, said Quill. The inquest is on Friday. I'm afraid you must attend. It won't take long, and anyway they'll pay you for it. Boof, said Stroganoff. The money, it interests me not. I am an artist. How much? Quill temporised and succeeded in leaving Stroganoff under the impression that he was coming into a small fortune. Me? He beamed affluently at Quill. I have the theory. I tell you, today when I lunch, I begin suddenly to think who I ask would want to kill Peluke. Everybody, I answer. But who would want to kill him specially, I continue. Well, there are still many people. There is even myself. I do all for Peluke. I make him a star. I give him best dressing room. I lend him money. And all he says is contract. But me, I do not suspect myself, so I know it must be somebody else. Quill suppressed a smile. I follow your reasoning, he said gravely. Then I ask myself, Arienskaya? No. Putik? No. Kasia? Pavel? Nivashna? No. The corps de ballet? No, they work too hard. Stanley? Perhaps. But he is too stupid, he would miss. The little Rubinska? No. But the mother of Rubinska? Ah, I tell myself, here is a different colour of a cow. Horse, corrected Quill. Horse, agreed Stroganoff affably. That mother, I put nothing past her. She's an awful woman. A assassin, a chicamo, she is him. And your reasons for this view? You English, you always want a reason, said Stroganoff irritably. For me it is enough that I suspect. But what makes you suspect? Stroganoff sought a sulky refuge in his tea. Then suddenly he brightened. Yesterday, he said, she came to me before the performance and asked to borrow my revolver. She always asks for something, so I lent it to her and think nothing of it. This was altogether incredible. Quill said as much. Stroganoff persisted weakly, but eventually gave way. Oh, all right, he admitted cheerfully. That I invent, but now I tell you the truth. It is, you will understand, la scandale, so you must not repeat. Until last year, he began, the little Rubinska, she danced the Swan Queen, common petite vierge, no good. Often I tell her so, my child, you must take yourself a lover, and I select for her many estimable young men. But always she refuse. These English girls, they are so respectable. And then suddenly I notice she dances right. So I inquire, and to my disgust, it is Anton. And as I say, this is bad and mauvaise affair. Anton will tire soon, and poof, off he go. So, Stroganoff went on, he'd gone to warn her mother. Quill gathered it had been a difficult interview. She muddled the issue by insisting upon marriage. If the villain wouldn't marry her daughter, she said, she would strangle him with her own hands. But she shoot him instead, said Stroganoff happily, and leaned back in his chair with an air of triumph. But this man who'd never seen Petrushka seemed singularly hard to convince. He kept on worrying about the mother's opportunity to fire, but at that moment the door was flung open and a large, disgruntled tornado burst into the room. A smaller tornado followed. The large tornado circled the room and came furiously to rest in front of Stroganoff's desk, where it solidified into the formidable outlines of Madame Rubinska, and demanded, "Is it correct that you have decided to give Anton's dressing room to that man?" "Which man?" said Stroganoff, playing for time. "Pavel," put in the small tornado, who in repose appeared as a dark, tired wisp of a girl. She had the soft voice of a dancer and a dancer's large, expressive eyes. Her mouth was also large, but this she inherited from her mother. "Pavel," echoed the large tornado. "Pavel!" And the concrete walls quivered beneath the noxious syllables. "All right," said Stroganoff defiantly. "I give it to Pavel. So what do you do?" "I'll tell you what I'll do," said the tornado. "I'll tell you what I'll do." "Maybe," asked the ever-hopeful Stroganoff, "you'd like your contract back, no?" "Exactly. Unless that flying fish goes out of the dressing room tonight, I go to Button Hook tomorrow." "Alone?" asked Stroganoff. "With my daughter. She shall not dance for you again. Poof! Furthermore, she shall not dance for you tonight." This shook Stroganoff, but not nearly as hard as it shook Rubinska. It was to be her first London appearance in Lac des Cygnes since her celebrated deflowering, her first chance to confound the critics who last year had markedly admired nothing but her technique. And here was Mamma getting impulsive again. "Aren't we being rather hasty, Mother?" she put in. A hurt and dazed Tornado flopped into an armchair. Quill felt that had she known the expression, she would have said et tu, Brute. "After all," continued Rubinska, "Pavel is a star, and we don't want to upset him. Besides, his lifts are magnificent." "Lifts," soughed the Tornado. "They are important," said Stroganoff critically. "Not as important as elevation, and not so important as that matter of the dressing room. A good elevation," pursued Stroganoff, "it is a quarter of the combat. The other 3/4 is the management. A good management," he added quickly, "it is like a mother of a dancer. It pushes, it praises, it is always by her side." "If," said the Tornado grimly, "you imagine you can flatter me into forgetting my daughter's interests for a moment, you are wrong." She flounced out of her chair, easily evaded Stroganoff's gallant attempt to kiss her hand, and sailed out. The daughter followed obediently. "Poof," said Stroganoff uneasily. "Poof," agreed Quill. "Now you have seen her," said Stroganoff. "You are convinced that she is the assassin, no?" "You said she was on the balcony that night." "Sure," said Stroganoff. "I see her myself." "Then where exactly were you at the time of the murder?" Stroganoff shifted uneasily. "Poof," he said. "This does not matter." Stroganoff pleaded it was personal business and nothing to do with the crime. Quill insisted it was merely a matter of routine. Thus pressed, Stroganoff admitted reluctantly that he'd been in his box during the fatal act, when suddenly he noticed someone on the right-hand balcony who had no right to be there. "An impostor," he said indignantly. "An impersonator. So me, I run to the wings, borrow the Arabian dressing gown, and climb up to catch him blue-handed. But I am too slow." "Did you see anybody on the balcony when you were up there?" asked Quill. "But there were many people," said Stroganoff. "Only they are all coming down. But I push and only look for one man." "And this man you were looking for? Who is he?" "That," said Stroganoff, "is a matter for the ballet Stroganoff only. In a case of murder, it's also the business of the police. I must insist on his name." "Me, I forget," said Stroganoff evasively. "It is difficult to remember all those long Russian names, no?" he added hopefully. However, Quill was not to be put off. For 5 minutes Stroganoff wriggled and prevaricated, after which time he yielded the name. It was that of Pavel's dresser, Serge Apessine.
Episode 4. After investigating the ballet Stroganoff, Inspector Quill now has his first clear suspects in the Petrushka murder case. Or has he?
It was just after 4 p.m. that Quill left Stroganoff's office. Stroganoff claimed to have seen Appelsine on the balcony. Appelsine's statement was that he had been standing in the wings. Quill felt that Sergeant Banner could well relieve him in the next dependent case, the checking up of the contradictory statements made by Stroganoff and Serge Appelsine. "Leave it to me," said Sergeant Banner importantly. "I'll make 'em talk." "Oh, they'll talk all right," smiled Quill. "Your trouble will be to make them keep to the point." Curiously complacent at having thus neatly saddled Banner with part of his own sufferings, Quill took a taxi to the hotel to interview the Poutiques. The Poutiques occupied a double bedroom on the 5th floor. Quill's luck was in, for Arienskaya was out. Amid the wildly congested acreage of 5 cabin trunks, 7 hat boxes, a fleet of attache cases, the old man was enjoying a doze. He yawned vaguely at Quill's entry. "We pay the bill next week," he promised, and turned over. It seemed almost a shame to disturb him, but Quill patted him on the back and thrust his official card into his hand.
He blinked Percheek into wakefulness. He jumped from the bed and exuded hospitality. "Whiskey and soda?" he asked, but there was none. "Cigar?" The cabinet was empty. Quill offered his cigarette case. Percheek accepted happily. "I will make you tea," he promised. "Russian tea with lemon." "I understand," said Quill, "that you were amongst those that occupied the right-hand balcony during the performance." The old man blushed and bowed his head. "It is true," he admitted. "I, Percheek, premier dancer of the Mariinsky, who have danced before the Tsar, the Kaiser, and many presidents, and received their congratulations, now walk on to the balcony. But what would you? One must live, and they say I'm too old to dance, but they are wrong," he said more loudly. "My legs are a little tired, maybe, but my technique and my character, they are still unequaled. Did I not prove it to them this morning?" "You certainly did," Quill consoled him. "Ah," said Percheek sorrowfully, "you understand. You are an artist. But the others, they are not convinced. Nevertheless, I will convince them. You will see." "Of course you will," said Quill, agreed. "But when you were on the balcony, did you notice anybody or anything that struck you in any way unusual?" The old man pondered. "I noticed that Anton, he danced disgusting, but that is not unusual. He always danced disgusting. When I remember the Petrushkas that have been Dzerzhinsky, Bolln, Voskovsky, myself, and then Anton Palouk, well, my blood, it simmer like a samovar." With some difficulty, Quill managed to dislodge him from the subject of Palouk's inferior technique. "I have been informed," he said, "that you and Palouk were not on the best of terms." Percheek shrugged. "We have nothing in common." "Your wife found him interesting." "My wife," said Percheek, "think as I do. She always afraid to drop the ballerina." "Still," Quill said, "your wife thought more of him as a man than a dancer." "But no," he said, "it is 10 years since she slept with him. My wife and I," said Percheek, "we often laugh at it still. You see," he added confidentially, "Anton very bad in bed. Now, when I was a young man, Quill was beginning to realize that as a jealous husband, Percheek hardly came up to scratch. He was just reminding Quill of his triumph in Paris when the door opened to admit a large cabbage, a bouquet of roses, a box of Turkish delight, a portable gramophone, and a shrill stream of Russian. Behind them was Arienskaya. "Ah," she beamed at Quill, "Monsieur the detective, whiskey and soda." This was too much for Quill. "I'll see you at the theatre tonight," he said, and fled. Back to the theatre to find a purple-faced Sergeant Banner clamouring for the arrest of a young exquisite who had amiably mistaken the sergeant's shy approach for a suggestion of quite a different character. To the pub to repair the sergeant's self-respect. Back to Earl's Court to evade Miss Treacle and find a boiled shirt, a tepid meal, and the theatre again. Straight into Strogonoff's welcoming arms. "You have never seen Lac de Cine, no?" Beamed to the latter, grasped him by the arm, planted him inescapably in his box, and told him to be quiet. But the tough appearance of the four-seasoned ducks that made up the part de quatre in the Ballet Stroganoff was altogether too much for Quill. He excused himself. In the wings he found Rubinska. She was tapping a satin shoe, testing the block before the cascade of Eschkapelle that she was due to perform with the ease of an angel and the toes of a martyr, whilst beside her on guard stood the mother dragon, her eyes defying young Kasia Raniewski, standing hopefully a few yards away to come any closer. Quill strolled over and congratulated her on her performance. "It was better?" asked Rubinska. "Warmer?" "Oh, great," said Quill. "Even greater than your doll this morning." "Oh, this morning I could not dance," sighed Rubinska. "I was sad." Quill nodded. "You were very friendly with Palouk." "I was his mistress," said Rubinska simply. But the mother rushed in to defend her child's honour. "Of course," she said, "they were engaged." "That is a lie," said Rubinska wearily. "We were not engaged." "Well," gasped the mother. It was a new experience to have her daughter defying her, and one she felt curiously incapable of handling. She backed away like a defeated steamroller. "If you like," said Rubinska, "you can come and talk to me in my dressing room whilst I'm changing." Your mother, said Quill. I'll get rid of Mother, promised Rubinska. I'm sick of Mother. After the performance, she was as good as her word. Quill knocked and entered. Rubinska, at her dressing table, looked at him mischievously. Now, you were hoping that as Anton's mistress I might have something interesting to tell you, but I'm afraid you were disappointed. I doubt if I can tell you anything you haven't already heard from the others. And I was in my dressing room at the time of the shot, so I didn't even see anything that might prove useful. Does that mean, asked Quill, that you didn't take your curtains? He'd been revolving in the ballet world long enough now to realize this was almost incredible. Rubinska nodded. It's unheard of, I know, but I went straight to my dressing room after leaving the stage. Caryl Brahms escorted me so he can bear me out, and then Arienskaya came in and found me. Quill remembered something. She found you crying. So she's told you, said Rubinska. Yes, I was crying. Because Paluk was dead. I didn't know he was dead, said Rubinska. No, I was crying because something that had happened during the performance upset me. That's why I didn't stop for my curtains. I don't want to seem tactless, said Quill, but could you tell me what it was that upset you? Anton and I had a quarrel during the performance. You know the booths that house the puppets at the back of the stage? Well, my booth is next to Anton's, and the walls are very thin. Well, it was the first time I found myself anything like alone with Anton for over a month. He's taken care of that, and I couldn't resist an appeal to him. One moment, interposed Quill. The booth on the other side of you, if I remember correctly, is occupied by Pavel. Do you think he could overhear your conversation? Rubinska actually laughed. He could and did. It's no wonder Arienskaya says I danced badly last night. I defy anyone to dance well with a partner they feel wants to murder them. Oh, I've heard now that Anton and Pavel had a terrific row in the interval. About you? Oh, about me. Paluk had said he was sick to death of being pestered by jealous women, or men for that matter, that when he was through, he was through. Couldn't Pavel and she console each other and leave him alone? So when did you learn that Paluk had been shot? Rubinska said it was shortly after Arienskaya had left her. It's curious, said Quill bluntly. Arienskaya said you told her. Rubinska seemed surprised. She found me crying. She asked me what was up, and I said, Anton. And she gave a yelp and literally raced out of the room. She turned to Quill. Do you think I look so tragic that she thought I meant Anton was dead? Anything's possible with these Russians, said Quill tactfully. As a matter of precaution, he had a few words with Arienskaya before leaving the theatre. Her version tallied with Rubinska's. A highly complacent Sergeant Banner greeted Quill on his arrival at the yard the following morning. Stroganoff had told the truth. Several people had seen him going up on the balcony, several people had seen him on it, and the carpenter and 2 members of the corps de ballet had noticed him coming down a few seconds before Paluk was shot. Stroganoff, therefore, was not the murderer. Appelsine had lied. He was on the balcony, dressed in a peasant's costume, exactly as Stroganoff had stated. Several of the cast had noticed him. However, he had descended before Stroganoff had arrived. This was also vouched for, and was standing in the wings when Paluk was shot. Therefore, he too was not the murderer. Nevertheless, he had thought it necessary to lie to Quill. Why? The answer, it emerged, was Pavel. Pavel had not been in the wings as he had claimed. The same 3 witnesses who had seen Stroganoff had seen Pavel on leaving the stage, sprint round, climb up the balcony, arriving as the cast on the balcony were preparing to go down, and standing in the rear near the doorway where he could not be seen from the front. Several of the cast had noticed him in his Moor's costume as they brushed past. One of them had even noticed Pavel beckoning urgently to Appelsine, who'd come over and after a few words handed over something. They could not say what. Curiously enough, no one had seen Pavel come down, though he had appeared in front of the curtain to make his bow to the audience, as he had stated. Thinking over the evidence, Quill decided it was quite possible for Pavel to have done the murder. He had the motive, jealousy, and now it was proved he also had the opportunity. As for means, it had only to be proved that Pavel possessed or had access to a revolver, and the case was almost complete. A sudden thought struck Quill. Stroganoff had gone up to the balcony to look for Appelsine. He must in that case have seen Pavel. Why had he not mentioned it? With 3 liars to interview, Quill was in some doubt as to which liar to approach first. Eventually, he decided that he would start with Apacine. Quill arrived at the theatre at 11 o'clock, where a pop-eyed Stanley materialized in the corner and grasped him urgently by the arm. "I found it!" "What? This?" Stanley delved into his pockets and produced a bulky shape rolled in a handkerchief. Quill unrolled it. It was a revolver. One bullet had been fired from the chamber. It was doubtless the murderer's gun. "Good boy," said Quill approvingly. "You remembered not to touch it." "Well, I did touch it at first in my excitement at finding it," admitted Stanley reluctantly. "And where did you find it?" asked Quill. If only he had found it in Pavel's quarters. He had. In the waste paper basket of all places. "After everybody had gone yesterday," explained Stanley, "I decided to search all the rooms." "Why?" asked Quill. "The police searched the place pretty thoroughly on the night of the murder." "Well, you never know," said Stanley. "Thought I might find something useful. And didn't I?" This was undeniable. "I found a lot of queer things," said Stanley, blushing slightly at the recollection. "Then I came to Pavel's old dressing room. He moved to Paluk's room last night, you know. And there, halfway down the waste paper basket, was the revolver. And now," he finished eagerly, "I suppose you're going to arrest Pavel." Quill laughed. "It isn't as simple as that. There is no evidence at all that it is Pavel's revolver, and in any case, it may have been planted there later. Shall I get you a list of all the people that have been in Pavel's room since the murder?" Quill imagined the list would comprise the entire company. It was a good method of getting rid of Stanley as any other. "Oh, do," he said cordially. With an important nod, Stanley went off on his task, and Quill reached Pavel's dressing room without further interruption. Applecine was busy ironing a costume in which due course Pavel would no doubt appear revolting. He did not look at all pleased to see Quill. Direct attack is best with sulky suspects. Detective Handbook, Rule 57. "Why," he said, "did you lie to me yesterday?" Apacine regarded him warily, but said nothing. "You told me at the end of Petrushka you were waiting in the wings." "Actually," said Quill, "you were up on the right-hand balcony wearing a peasant's costume." "It is a lie." "I have half a dozen people who saw you." Applecine put down his iron. "It is true, I was up there," he admitted. "What of it?" "Only," said Quill gently, "that this is a case of murder." Applecine sulked. "I was up there to get a better view of the dancing." "I suggest," said Quill, "that you were on the balcony for an entirely different reason." "No." "You were up there to shoot Paluk." And quite suddenly, Quill felt that he'd hit on the truth. Applecine was furiously jealous of Paluk. He'd gone up on the balcony to shoot him. Stroganoff had seen him there, so had Pavel. Stroganoff had gone round to curse Pavel, divining his intention to stop him. Pavel had got there first, taken his gun, this was the object that was seen being passed, and sent Applecine away. Pavel, who had had just the row with Paluk, and yielded to sudden opportunity and shot him. It was all pure theory, of course, but it fitted the facts. "No," said Applecine. "I was not on the balcony when Paluk died. I was in the wings. There will be people who see me." "Well, that's all right," said Quill. "I never said you shot him. I only said you went up there to shoot him. We know," Quill bluffed, "that when you went up on the balcony, you had a revolver with you. It worked." "You know that?" "You police, you know everything." "Almost everything," corrected Quill. Applecine hesitated. "You suspect Pavel?" "We suspect nobody," said Quill. "All we want is facts." Applecine considered again. "All right," he said. "I tell you everything, but remember, Pavel did not do it." Gradually the story emerged. It was identical with Quill's theory. Pavel, dancing on the stage, had noticed Applecine on the roof. Applecine had often told Pavel that he would kill his rival, and Pavel, seeing him on the balcony, had guessed his intention. Immediately on his exit, when Petrushka lay dead on the stage, Pavel had dashed round and, standing on the balcony, had called Applecine over. He had taken away the gun and ordered him down. "Which was just as well," said Applecine. "So you see," he added, "I did not do it, and Pavel did not do it either, for he has to come down quick to take his curtains." Quill nodded. "Oh, we have witnesses that he took his curtains." "Ah," said Applecine, relieved. Quill noted the relief with satisfaction. He did not want Applecine to know how gravely Pavel was suspected until the case against him was almost complete. And it was almost complete. Quill thanked Apacine for his information and turned to leave. "Please," said Apacine suddenly, "you do me a favour." "Yes?" "You do not speak to my master of this today." Quill had no intention of approaching Pavel until and if the time came for his arrest. "You see, my master must dance Petrushka tonight, and the audience will be critical. He must dance his best, and if he knows he has been suspect, it will upset him. And that is bad for dancing. So please, you say nothing until after the program." This suited Quill's plans beautifully. He pretended to hesitate, and then consented. Apacine shook him warmly by the hand. For no reason at all, Quill suddenly felt a cad.
Episode 5. Inspector Quill's investigation in the Petrushka murder is reaching its fruition as he prepares himself for an arrest.
"Go away," said Stroganoff, not too hopefully. "Shan't keep you a moment," said Quill, and followed him into the office. "Whiskey and soda?" "There isn't any," said the experienced Quill. "No," said Stroganoff. "All right, then we have Russian tea. Please don't trouble," said Quill. "I want," said Stroganoff, enunciating carefully into the telephone, 3 spoonfuls of the best Houchon. You will add the citron. Cut me 3 mans. Russian tea," the curt voice. "Oak." This weighty matter satisfactorily settled, Stroganoff sat back in his chair and beamed at Quill. He was himself again. "Good morning," he said. "You have come to thank me for my lacticine, no?" "I'm afraid," said Quill, "I'm here to investigate Paluk's death." "Still?" said Stroganoff, astonished. "You told me yesterday," said Quill, "that you went up on the balcony in the last act. Who was on the balcony when you arrived?" Any doubts that Quill felt that Stroganoff might not have seen Pavel up there vanished with the question. It took the impresario fully 2 seconds to answer, and then he said he could not remember. "But you remember seeing Apacine from the front?" "Oui, and you remember going up on the balcony?" "Certainement, and Apacine was not there." "No, but who was there?" "Me," said Stroganoff cleverly. "And who else?" There was a knock at the door. "Ah," said Stroganoff, "the tea." But it was Stanley. For the first time in his record, Stroganoff was pleased to see him. Quill could deal with that easily. He winked at Stanley. "Go away," he said, and Stanley, delighted, made stealthily for the door. "Now," he turned back to his task, "will you tell me who you saw on the balcony?" "Mais passons, then I will tell you." Stroganoff crumpled, but only slightly. "If you know," he said defiantly, "why you ask?" There was a knock at the door. "Ah," said Stroganoff, "the tea." But it was Putik, come to complain that Pavel was dancing Petrushka that night. "When I danced Petrushka so magnificently yesterday," he explained, "I say to myself, I am superb. Surely our wise director Stroganoff will now see that I must dance the part, but you are still blind. You have given him to Pavel, who danced even worse than Anton." To Quill's surprise, Stroganoff did not seem annoyed. With extraordinary gentleness, he put an arm around the old man's shoulders, led him to the door, and pushed him out in Russian. "That one, he was a great dancer, a great artist," he began hopefully. "If you like, I'll tell you his history." But even as Quill tried to prevent the launching, the door opened again. The new arrival was well built, but not well dressed. He had magnificent shoulders and a yellow polo sweater. He was already talking. "I have been inspired with the most colossal idea that ever happened to anybody," he announced to the unintroduced Quill. "Sit down, have a cigarette," said Stroganoff. "I present you to Monsieur Quill. He is a great lover of the ballet and also a policeman. For you, Monsieur Quill," he said in ringing tones, "you have the pleasure to meet the choreographer of the future, Nicholas Nevarshina, whose work you must learn to love, though, alas, it takes time and much money. We will now listen to his new idea." "It is superb," said the choreographer of the future. "I tell you, but first you change me small cheque." "No," said Stroganoff. "All right," said Nevarshina, not noticeably disappointed. "I still tell you. The morning I find a paper on the bus, and I notice that the red shirts, they are angry, and the black shirts, they are angry too. All the nations, all the politics,
It is shirts. Very well, I decide. We will make the symbolic ballet with many shirts. How many shirts? Asked Stroganoff apprehensively. Not many, said Navashno. Say 4 dozen. 2 dozen, bartered Stroganoff. They would be of aluminium. There would be 7 scenes and an apotheosis. All the best composers they shall write the score. Stravinsky, Ravel, Prokofiev. Never will the world see a ballet like it. Never shall they see it, agreed Stroganoff. But it is colossal. It ruined me. There was a pause. All right, said Navashno. In that case, I ask you a favour. Now that you have saved the expense of production, you change me small cheque. No. All right, said Navashno philosophically. He turned to Quill. Perhaps you change it? No, said Quill. All right, said Navashno, and went. That one, said the ever-hopeful Stroganoff, is a great artist too. If you like, I tell you his story. But Quill had had quite enough of this. On the contrary, he said, you will tell me that you saw Pavel on the balcony. Stroganoff leapt to his histrionic feet. The scoundrel, he was there, then I find him too. Have a heart, said Quill. There's no point in keeping this up. I have several witnesses who saw him up there. Stroganoff abandoned his amateur theatricals and looked annoyed. Inspector Detector, he snapped, you should have told me this before, then I not tried to lead you round the gooseberry bush. Then why did you try it? But it is simple, said Stroganoff. If I tell you that I see Pavel on the balcony with a gun, you think that Pavel shoot Anton, and then maybe you arrest him, no? And who should dance Petrushka on Wednesday week before Benoit himself if he come? You say, poof, it is not important. You are the police, or you desire someone to hang, but me, I am an artist and businessman. But if Pavel murdered Paluk, what does it matter who killed Anton? He is dead, and we must find another dancer for Petrushka, and that is Pavel. So I decide I tell you nothing to Wednesday week. After that, I say I hide nothing no longer, even though it mean I have to find a new dancer. I tell the police everything. Expressed like that, Quill felt this was really rather handsome of him. But, said Stroganoff, you'll find out and everything is lost. Please, he looked at Quill appealingly. You do me a favour, no? You do not arrest Pavel till after Wednesday week. It is not certain if we shall arrest him at all, said Quill, and if you are wise, you will not mention the matter to Pavel. It might, he added cunningly, upset his dancing. To this, Stroganoff nodded judiciously. You are right, mon cher, he agreed. He is not as calm as I am. At the yard, Quill was informed that his chief wanted to see him. Quill was not amused. Sit down, said the cold voice behind the desk. It did not say, whiskey and soda. It did not inquire, you have slept well, no? But at least it did not expect him to drink Russian tea. I've been reading over your scanty reports, said the snarl, and it seems to me that it ought to be a fairly simple case. I almost envy you working amid that fascinating background. It reminds me, said the snarl, suddenly human, of the St. Petersburg pearls case, when I took the divine Arienskaya out to supper. Who? Said Quill, startled. It was before your time, said the snarl condescendingly. She was a famous dancer and very, very beautiful. Mind you, she had a will of her own. She still has, said Quill. But alas, she is no longer so beautiful. She's with the Stroganoff Company now, he explained. The snarl was suddenly interested. They're giving Petrushka tonight, said Quill. You have seen Petrushka, no? The snarl looked startled at such curious English. Not for ages, he admitted boyishly. Book me 2 seats for tonight. No, 1 seat. Now, what have you to report, if anything? Sir, said Quill, I would like to apply for a warrant for the arrest of Pavel Bunya of the Stroganoff Company. Mais, mon cher, said Stroganoff for the 15th time. Very sorry, said Quill for the 16th time. But you promised that you would not make the arrest until after Wednesday week. Sorry, said Quill. And now you will not even wait until after the performance tonight. You are frightened that he escape. But that, said Stroganoff, is stupid, imbecile. He is on stage all the time. He will not go until he take his curtains, and when he come off, poof, you catch him. Quill began to feel sorry for the old boy. After all, he reasoned, What did it really matter if he postponed the arrest? And he was certainly likely to get Pavel away with less fuss and trouble if he waited till after the performance. "All right," he said, "I agree. After the performance." The great British public did not, as Stanley prophesied, refuse to stand for a second performance of Petrushka so close on the heels of the tragedy. Indeed, they stood for hours in talkative serried ranks. By 8:15, the house was almost packed. There was a curdling of mothers, a hesitancy of fathers, an edging away of critics, all society, all the intelligentsia. The only notable addition this evening was Quill's chief, the snarl, miraculously transformed into a blush behind a bunch of orchids. "Ah!" shrilled a voice as he puffed his way laboriously across the foyer. "It is my old friend Jellybags!" It was Arienskaya, resplendent in a Spanish shawl from good-humoured ladies, a Russian tiara from the Firebird, and an ostrich egg pearl necklace, Scheherazade, and the red silk evening dress, her own. The snarl blushed deeper and bent gallantly to kiss her hand. It only just managed it. "You have got fat," said Arienska frankly. "You, madame, are more fascinating than ever," announced the snarl, getting into its stride and presenting the orchids with a portly flourish. Arienskaya pounced on them with a shrill cry of ecstasy. Her pleasure gratified the blush. It was not so gratified, however, to observe Quill standing a few yards away and looking every bit as pleased. It became definitely annoyed when Arienskaya beckoned Quill over, and it was a last straw when she introduced him. "This," she said proudly, "is Monsieur Jellybags. His other name I forget." "I know it," said Quill. "He and I were very good friends," began Arienskaya with unusual delicacy, "but that long time ago. I do not think he is so good in bed now," she finished, making up for it. "Not at all," declared the blush, too confused to know exactly what it was it wanted to deny. Quill could not remember when he had enjoyed himself so much. "And now you will come with me to my box, and you will see that no ballerina today can dance like I danced once." The snarl came quietly. Up in the Star's dressing room, Pavel was giving a display of that temperament that had endeared him to so many of his enemies. He cursed the solicitous apple scene. He cursed his wigmaker. He cursed the London weather, and just for luck he cursed Stroganoff. The call boy put an end to this. Pavel applied the finishing touches to his face and made his way down to the stage. The curtain would be up in a few minutes. Rubinska was already in her booth, and Nevazhno, who had secured the role of the Moor, was entering his. Pavel scowled at them both impartially, entered his booth, and settled into his armrest to await his cue. Judge then of the crack in his perilous calm, caused by the strong smell of brilliantine and volti subito, the conductor. The conductor's face smiled evilly at him around the canvas edges of the puppet booth. "Hello, big boy," said Volti, every inch the villain. "So this is your great chance, eh? Only not while I'm conducting." As the orchestra broke into the opening bars, even Stroganoff sensed that this evening, though financially a good thing, was unlikely to prove an artistic success. "That one, I sack him," muttered Stroganoff, as Volti Subito passed a hand over his hair, straightened his tie, and flicked a wrist vaguely in the direction of the big drum. "This is like old times," said the snarl fondly to the stupefied Arienskaya. On the stage, the organ grinder churned out his tune. The street dancers went slickly through their routine. From the balcony, the gypsies threw coins at them. From behind the curtains steps the magician. He pipes a wily tune on a reed. The flautist, oblivious, 2 bars behind him. The curtains part, and lo, the puppets loll inanimate in their cells. Rubinska, eager in her stillness, the Moor, Nevazhno, obviously thinking of something else, and Petrushka, his face so quiet it might have been a mask. Beep, beep, goes the flute, and the Moor, abandoning the problem he is working on, springs jerkily into life. Beep, beep. Rubinska is on her points. Beep, beep. Petrushka still lolls inanimate. "What did I tell you?" said the balletto medico with satisfaction. "He's missed his cue." Beep, beep, went the flute again, a trifle impatiently. But Petrushka took no notice of his master. He was huddled in his cell,
A dark stain was beginning to appear on the side of his white clown's tunic. The magician took a step forward, touched gingerly, and withdrew, gazing fascinated at a hand that was red and wet. The crowd swept forward. "Curtained!" screamed Arienskaya from her box. Pavel was dead. He'd been shot through the back in line with his heart. Death, whenever it had been administered, must have been instantaneous. Quill looked at the body. The company, silent, stood around in small groups. The snarl came hurrying over, behind him Arienskaya and Stroganoff. Speechlessly they ranged themselves beside Quill. It was Stroganoff who broke the silence. "What a pity," he said. "Just as you were going to arrest him, too."
Episode 6. With yet another victim in the Petrushka murders, Detective Inspector Quill now realizes he's taken a wrong turn.
Although Palouk went to his grave with a grouch at the scant notice taken by the world of his quitting it, Pavel had no such grievance. He was definitely a front-page story. The murder of 2 dancers in the same ballet, in the same role, at the same theatre, within 4 days of each other, roused the press to a height of enthusiasm that had never been reached by their performances in it. The regular ballet critics were gently brushed aside, and ace crime reporters rushed out to take their place. They did their job well. From the masterly scare lines, "A bullet in the ballet," "Another clown dances to death," through pulsating paragraphs, "Still lifeless with a slow red patch seeping through his blouse, the clown lay dead, Pavel Bunia would dance no more," to a highly imaginative picture of a vengeful Stroganoff vowing to give up her vodka till he had laid the murderer by his entrechat. Oh, it was a lovely story. If Pavel had had any complaint, it could only have been that his dancing abilities were not noticeably stressed. And then, their appetites still unappeased, they all turned up at the inquest on Anton Palouk. The coroner, Mr. Asa Zug, whose only distinction up to date was that his was the last name in the telephone book, welcomed them with gusto. This time he felt he had definitely put one over on a certain colleague. Now he, Asa Zug, had the opportunity to get some of his own observations on the front page. The court was packed. 50 happy reporters and a complacent coroner did much to dissipate the formal atmosphere that is so much in evidence on these occasions. While it could not be called a fashionable inquest, eccentric describes it admirably. Poor Mr. Jones of Muswell Hill, not the one you know, who never missed an inquest, found himself to his annoyance pushed against the wall next to a young man sporting a perfume that even his wife would not dream of using. In the well of the court, an ostrich feather waved magnificently. "Oh, it is hot," said Arienskaya, and Putik, taking over the fan, waved eloquently. "This reminds me," he said, "of Salome." It was a fascinating theme. "Oh, and I dance her in Monte Carlo," began Arienskaya to Stroganoff. But Stroganoff was oblivious. He had many other things to think about. His finances seemed to be improving, the house would be packed tonight and the night after. But who would dance Petrushka on Wednesday week to Benoit himself if he come? He had not had time to have his lemon tea this morning. Navajno was looking around the court hopefully. These people who had been so obliging yesterday, here they all were. He must talk to them again. Happily, he fingered his diminished checkbook. A frantic usher was telling Quill that he had been quite unable to keep the witnesses out of the courtroom. Quill felt heavily responsible for Pavel's death. If he had not yielded to Stroganoff's blandishments, Pavel would still have been alive. On the other hand, it looked now as though he would once again have been arresting the wrong man. And yet the evidence against Pavel had been convincing enough. The revolver, the motive, and the time lag all fitted in. Even his murder could not absolve him entirely of suspicion, but it certainly shook Quill's faith in his guilt. Last night had not been pleasant. The snarl had been far from sympathetic. Somebody, one of the many people that had passed behind the booth, had parked a gun against it, shot Pavel, and left the gun beside it. The gun had been promptly identified by Stanley as his own.
He had missed it yesterday, but had gleefully decided not to present the police with his own clues. No mystery at all as to how the murder was done, only who did it. Once again his notebook was bristling with names, but the detective's handbook, Eliminate Your Suspects with Caution, was singularly unhelpful. Quite frankly, he had not the remotest idea who had killed either of them. In the meantime, he would not stress his suspicions of Pavel to the coroner. The jury were looking intelligent. In the witness box, the Ballet-Medico was telling his story. He showed a slight tendency to dwell on artistic details, and the coroner, in blissful ignorance of what was coming to him later, was under the impression that he was faced with a difficult witness and was handling him extremely well. He was shocked to learn that the body had been moved at Stroganoff's orders before the police arrived, and made up his mind to deal faithfully with that witness when he came up. He plied the Ballet-Medico with questions. How did he come to be summoned to the corpse? No public appeal for a doctor had been made to the audience. I was called by Mr. Stroganoff's secretary. How did he know you were present? Everybody knew, said the Ballet-Medico with pride. I'm always present at the ballet premiere. I've been present at every ballet premiere, bar one, for the past 15 years. Which one? Asked the coroner, interested in spite of himself. God, no. And why was that? Navashno, too, was on his feet, hotly demanding an explanation. It was his ballet. I was down with flu. All right. Navashno, obviously relieved, subsided into his seat. For just a moment, I fear it is because you do not admire my work. I don't, said the Ballet-Medico. Navashno leapt to his feet again. Order was restored with difficulty. The police surgeon who followed struck a more formal note. His evidence was a model of what evidence should be, cold, curt, and precise. Nobody listened to it. Following him, Quill confined his evidence to an outline of fact, and refused to allow the coroner to lure him into theorizing of any kind. A dull witness, thought the disappointed coroner. He brightened slightly as Stroganoff took the stand. This one looked much more promising. You are, he said, speaking very distinctly, as one must when speaking to someone who probably does not understand English very well. Vladimir Alexander Stroganoff? But of course, said Stroganoff, surprised. You are the proprietor of the Stroganoff Ballet, at present performing at the Collodium Theatre. Oh, we try to get Covent Garden, explained Stroganoff, a little shamefaced. He's not good ballet, he conceded magnanimously. Maybe some day we go into partnership. On the night of the 6th, said the coroner firmly, you gave a performance of a ballet called Petrushka. In this ballet, Anton Palouk was found shot. Yes, I know already, said Stroganoff wearily. I understand that it was at your orders that the body was moved from the stage before the police arrived. Of course, beamed Stroganoff. I give all the orders in my company. Oh, Gelblag, said Arienskaya loudly. Silence, said the usher. What made you do this thing? Stroganoff looked perplexed. But what else can I do? Would you wish that I leave poor Anton in the middle of the Ajax decor, a ballet that he could never support? He had no taste, shouted Navashno defiantly. It is well known. Silence, said the usher. But were you not aware, pursued the coroner, still sweetly responsible, that the police would want to find everything undisturbed? But the audience very disturbed that they find dead body on my stage in my theatre, retorted Stroganoff. The police, they do not pay for seats. The audience, they do. But was it essential to continue the performance that night with your dancer shot? We do not continue the performance yesterday after Pavel died, said Stroganoff, and look what happens. Many people try to get their monies back. So, said the coroner less affably, your box office meant more to you than the death of your leading dancer. You did not care that your action might be helping a murderer to escape. The ballet must go on, said Arienskaya. Silence, said the usher. Mais, mon cher, I put it you as one artist to another, burbled Stroganoff. Where would my ballet be if at every little accident we make a stop? We must continue. In Bled there are riots, but my company, it perform every night. Some town in Mexico, they killed the president in the entr'acte. But the ballet Stroganoff, it ignore, and we give the last act to new president. They shoot him too next week. It was very sad. And then there was Paris. Big night, fashionable audience, all seats paid for. Pilaf was with us then. He danced Petrushka. It was in the bill that night. And then half an hour before the performance, I go to his dressing room and poof, he is suicided. But do I lose my head? No, we give instead that old favourite Casse Noisette in its entirety. A little unrehearsed perhaps, but the audience, they are pleased. And later I give the role of Petrushka to Anton. He stopped suddenly. Tiens, he said, that is curious. My 3 Petrushkas. They are all dead. During the scuffle at the press table that followed, Quill passed a note to the coroner. The coroner nodded. This Mr. Pilaf, he asked. You say he committed suicide. What form of suicide? He shot himself. What was his reason for suicide? Who can tell why an artist kill himself? Asked Stroganoff. Maybe he loves someone who do not love him. We are all very excited about it at time, but it's soon over and we go back to work. Our work, says Stroganoff, is to us everything. We eat, we drink, we laugh, we kill, but first of all we dance. A dance, he went on, warming to his theme. Quill began to feel a certain sympathy for the coroner. He'd been through it himself. Stroganoff was now well in his stride. Words cascaded from him in a mingled stream of French, Russian, and occasionally English. The coroner bleated at him pathetically. The clerk rallied to him with a series of shocked hushes, but they might as well have tried to stop a sports car at an amber light. It was a naturalized juryman who rescued the court. He shouted something in Russian. The uncouth adjective jerked Stroganoff out of his stride. He abandoned his discourse and began to reply in kind. The coroner, taking no further chances, dismissed the witness hurriedly. But his evidence, extricated from its froth, was the stone that started a great many rings of activity. 3 dead Petrushkas were a lovely gift to the press. They linked the 2 London murders, sensational enough in themselves, to the eerie chain of the supernatural, the theme that always fascinates, paving their way to superstition and panic. Already members of the company in court were whispering to each other, speculating with delightful shivers upon who would be offered the role next. For Quill, the news meant a new factor in his inquiry, the dispatch of telegrams to Paris, a possible reshuffle of all his ideas. Stanley was now in the box, efficiently furnishing details of his name, education, and career. His description of his own indispensability to the ballet nearly brought Stroganoff back hot-foot to deny it, while his version of the assistance he had given the police tempted Quill to do the same. Why, said Stanley, it was he who, by sheer deduction, had found the revolver with which Paluk had been shot. This was the first the court had heard of any revolver, and the coroner turned a reproachful eye on Quill. Quill quickly passed up a note stating that the police were not yet ready for this aspect of the case to come out. But Mr. Zazug was not to be browbeaten. He dismissed Stanley and recalled Quill. Did you, he asked, have the revolver given to you as stated by the last witness? Yes. Has it been established as the revolver that killed the deceased? Yes. The coroner paused before putting the vital question. He was aware that Quill did not want it asked, but he was not going to let the police bully him and suppressing all the more interesting evidence. Has the owner of the gun been traced? Quill was furious. Yes. What is his name? The police would prefer not to disclose it at the moment. Is that so? Curiously enough, said the coroner mildly, I was under the impression that I was conducting this inquest, not the police. He was asking for it, thought Quill. All right, he'll get it. His name is Pavel Bunia. The effect was extraordinary. For the first time in the history of the Ballet Stroganoff, you could have heard a pin drop. The man who was killed last night, said the coroner, hollowly. Exactly, said Quill. Are there any further questions you'd like to ask? No. There was another scuffle at the press table. Quill stepped down, leaving the coroner a prey to conflicting emotions. By his own insistence, he had unearthed a sensational piece of evidence, but if he followed it up, it was likely to result in a verdict of murder against the person who had himself been murdered. Could he risk that anomaly? Mr. Zazug decided he could not. The coroner called the next witness. This was Boutique. Quill himself was vaguely uncertain why he'd caused the old man to be subpoenaed, but Boutique took his importance for granted. He beamed affably at the coroner, the jury, and the press. He beamed at Arienskaya and Quill. He beamed at Stroganoff. He even beamed a trifle absently at Navajno. "Your name," said the coroner, "is P. Boutique, oui? You are a dancer with the ballet Stroganoff?" "Assuredly. My legs have got a little tired, but my elevation is perfect." Boutique turned triumphantly in the direction of Stroganoff. "You see, that one he understands." "You are a small part dancer," said the coroner tactlessly. "Who say that?" Boutique swung round again, while Stroganoff tiptoed guiltily towards the doorway. "It is true," Boutique explained to the court, "that now I dance only small parts, but it was not always so. At the Mariinsky," and before the coroner could stop him, he plunged into a recital of his triumph. "And it is agreed that I dance Petrushka." "Oui, oui," said Stroganoff, winking heavily at the coroner. "Bon," said Boutique, all affability again. "You shall see that I am superb. You come too," he invited the coroner. "You nice man, I give you a box." The coroner intimated that he'd like to ask Boutique a few questions. Boutique graciously permitted it. His answers were a little vague. He may have been on the balcony that night, but next week he was dancing the main role. Had they not heard? He was anxious to help the court, but his role, it must come first. He and Wozdikovsky. He was a very tired and disgruntled coroner who eventually addressed the jury. The inquest had not proceeded on the lines he'd visualized. Instead of holding the centre of the stage as he had intended, he'd been thrust firmly off it by the powerful personalities of the various witnesses. Instead of handling the witnesses had, for the most part, handled him. And as for investigating the cause of death, the only time he'd come across anything promising, he was brought to a full stop by the murder of the suspected person. In fact, he was robbed of everything save the prosaic direction to the jury to bring in a verdict of willful murder against a person or persons unknown. This he did, skating carefully over the thin ice of the discovery of the revolver. The jury duly obliged.
Episode 7. Following the inquest on Anton Pollock's murder, it would seem there is a mysterious jinx on whoever dances the role of Petrushka.
The evening after the inquest on Pollock, Quill sat in his room covering page after page of foolscap with schoolboy handwriting. When in doubt, counsels the detective handbook, document your facts and stare them in the face. Quill had followed this counsel. After some work, he found himself looking at the following. Petrushka. 3 dancers who danced or were due to dance this role have died within the last 2 months. February the 2nd, Marius Pilaf, found shot in dressing room of theatre in Paris. Verdict, suicide. April 6th, Anton Pollock, seen on top of booth in last scene of Petrushka at the Collodium Theatre. Verdict, murder by person or persons unknown. April 8th, Pavel Bunia, found shot in booth in the first scene of Petrushka, inquest not yet fixed. The following are known to have motives of sorts for the murder. Rubinska, in love with Pollock but discarded. P. Boutique, wife unfaithful with Pollock, ancient history now. Stroganoff feared that Pollock would leave him for Lord Buttonhook. Volti Subito, the conductor, known to dislike Pollock. Stanley Simpson, in wings at time of shooting. Pavel Bunia, a very strong case of circumstantial evidence surrounds this suspect. General dislike, or more, as in the case of Pollock, had the opportunity for the murder. Kasha Ranievsky, only man in company with whom Pollock was on friendly terms. If there is no connection between the cases, it is certainly curious that death should have overtaken the 3 while dancing or about to dance Petrushka. If there is a connection, it argues the presence of a person in the company with an antipathy for all Petrushka. For this antipathy to extend to homicide argues a madman. Detective's handbook not helpful in this respect. Watch carefully for indications of an unbalanced mind. But the entire Stroganoff company showed strong indications of unbalanced minds a dozen times daily. Reticence is not one of the qualities of Russian dancers, but so far have not encountered any person revealing a dislike of Petrushka in his speech. It seems to be a favourite part and much coveted by dancers. Even old Poutik, in spite of his age, still hankers after it. Assuming that there is a Petrushka hater in the company, would he or she not give themselves away every time they spoke of the ballet? There can be no harm in discussing the ballet with various members of the company and noting their reactions. After he looked at the last entry, it struck Quill that it was a pity that the murders had not taken place during a ballet by Navazhno. By all accounts, the place was bristling with people who did not like Navazhno's ballets. Quill smiled at the idea, and from there his thoughts passed to Navazhno himself. Immediately, Quill felt slightly excited. Not that Navazhno was any madder than the rest, but his mania lay in a passion for the modern, combined with an extreme sensitiveness of any disparagement of his own work. A ballet like Petrushka, though created as late as 1910, might easily appear to Navazhno as old and absurd, and its obstinate success might easily breed a hatred of it, which in turn might translate itself into a hatred of the performers in it. On the more prosaic question of opportunity, Navazhno had not been dancing in the ballet when Paluk was killed. As there was no possible reason to rank him amongst the suspects, his statement that he had been in the wings had not been closely checked. When Pavel was murdered, Navazhno was dancing the Moor and occupied the next booth but one to Pavel. This offered an opportunity of slipping out for a moment, shooting Pavel, and slipping back again. If this was the crime of a lunatic, there could be no better suspect. However, psychoanalysis was not one of his strongest points, and it might be as well to have an expert opinion when tackling Navazhno. Reasonably satisfied with the night's work, Quill put away his notes and went to bed. Scotland Yard was not the only body to get in touch with Paris over the murder of Marius Pilaf's suicide. The whole of Fleet Street had had the same idea. But while the connection between the three dead Petrushkas was only one of alternate theories to Quill, to the press, unhandicapped by the need of making an arrest, it had become a burning faith. In some mysterious way, the dead clowns seemed to have altered the face of London. Every small tobacconist and sweet shop had its bulgy window propped up with some inviting titbit as "Death stalks the ballet." 3 clowns no longer laugh. In trains, bobbing eyes focused on the ballet with the trail of blood. At home, dressing-gowned wives shuddered delightfully over composite pictures of the 3 Petrushkas hunched upon the stage, and strongly suspected Stroganoff of being the Bluebeard, mainly on account of his foreign name. The Night Dispatch hurriedly abandoned its series of latter-day Landrus in favour of tragedies in sawdust, Petrushka, Piero, Pagliacci, etc. 3 crumpled clowns flaunted the daily distraught posters. The clown with the cloud of death achieved the evening scoop. "They danced Petrushka and died," announced the Evening Yelp pathetically. "Is there a hoodoo on this ballet?" asked the Mystical Times. "Abandon this ballet," demanded Fascism for All. "Ballots, bullets, blood," promised a popular weekly. And then there were long articles, hurriedly commissioned from prominent writers of detective fiction, not one of which omitted to point out the truth was stranger than fiction. The Daily Distraught ran a special by their ace sob sister, Petunia Patch. "The terrible fate of these 3 crumpled clowns cries to the world for vindication. What is this row that brings with it a heritage of doom? The trail of death is set in Paris, city of laughter, city of love. There, huddled in his dressing-room, his sightless eyes raised to the powerless ceiling, his pitiful hands forever still, crouched the first fated clown, Marius Pilaf, who was of course first cousin to the well-known diplomat, Prince Andrei Andreev, known to balletomanes the whole world over for the brilliance of his tour en l'air en seconde. In London, Anton Paluk, whose Petrushka ranked second only to that of Nijinsky-Bolm-Voiskovsky, met his death in full view of a brilliant first-night audience. Petrushka, the comic figure of 1,000 Russian fairings. Petrushka, the tragic hero of a ballet weighted with tears. Petrushka, no man and every man. Petrushka, high on the roof of the blue-fringed booth, his mimed agony turning suddenly to the pangs of a terrible death. The second clown is a crumpled shape against the deep shadows of a painted world, and still that grisly tally has not been concluded. Behind the curtains at the puppet's booth, hiding what dreadful secret, screening what cunning hand, the finest dancer of them all lurches against the canvas walls. His features are still beneath the running grease paint. His mouth has sagged horribly. Pavel Bunia has met a death more secret, perhaps more terrible than any of these fated clowns. Who is to be the next Petrushka? The dancers ask. Who is to be the next Petrushka? And what will happen to him? In what familiar guise does death stalk the ballet? These children of superstition cry, and who will be foolhardy enough to take the role on Wednesday week? Who brave enough? Who? Stroganoff was sick of the question. The waiter who brought his chocolate in the morning, the commissionaire who called his taxi, the stage doorkeeper at his theatre, sundry members of his company lingering about the stairs. To make it worse, he had not the faintest idea who was going to dance Petrushka. Ernest Smitsky was his most experienced dancer now, but it was impossible to visualize Smitsky as Petrushka, or rather, only too easy to visualize that grim conscientiousness pirouetting as faultlessly and as unemotionally as a whirling top. Still, Smitsky was a coward. He'd probably be only too relieved not to be offered the part. But his other dancers were almost as unsuitable. The only one of his younger members who showed any signs of talent was Kasha Ranievsky. Stroganoff suddenly remembered that he'd promised the part to P. Putik to keep him quiet at the inquest. Putik must be told at once not to take the promise too seriously. At any moment he might go and make the announcement to some reporter. It would not be pleasant breaking the news to the old man. Bright idea. He'd tell Stanley to do it. "But you be tactful, no?" he finished. "Oh, what was that clever English axiom about breaking off 2 glass houses with 1 stone?" reflected Stroganoff happily, as Stanley departed. Well, certainly he'd achieved it this time. Life perhaps was not so complicated after all. His ballet was a sensation as never before, all seats sold, weeks ahead, and the management actually asking him to extend his season. For the first time for many years, he saw himself solvent. What with his profits and those gold shares he had bought last week that would soon be double, he'd soon be rich and prosperous, and his broker. He would at last be polite. "I will ring him now," he promised himself, "and find out how they are feeling." But here was Monsieur Quill, doubtless in a very good humour over the new assassin that he must find. Stroganoff pushed away the receiver and produced his usual welcome. Quill replied shortly that he had not slept at all. Quill stopped him. "I've come to ask you some questions." Stroganoff was instantly depressed. "Useless to come to me and ask who dance Petrushka next. It is a problem bien difficile. First, we have none who can dance it good, and second, if we should find such a one, he should be afraid. All my dancers think that when they dance Petrushka next, they die. It is your newspapers that have done this thing to me." Indignantly, he picked up the Daily Distraught, brandished it, and threw it into the waste-paper basket, only to rescue it the next moment. "My shares, they are in that." "I would like a few details about Pilaf's suicide," said Quill, and Stroganoff sighed. If he were only alive, my problem in it would not exist. He was superb as Petrushka, not as superb as Voiskovsky, but better than Anton Paluk." The phone bell rang. "J'écoute," said Stroganoff. "I am dancing him myself," he finished fiercely. "I would like to hear your own account of Pilaf's death." Stroganoff shrugged. "It was strange. Pilaf, very nice man. He laugh, he joke. The girls, they all like him. And never he asked me for an advance. And then, poof, he suicided. It is the mystery insoluble." "Did he, to your knowledge, have any enemies?" "Mais no, we all love him. Except maybe Nevashno. Nevashno a little cross because Pilaf he never consent to dance in his ballets. Pilaf very old-fashioned and would never dance anything later than Fokin." "And that upsets Nevashno?" "What would you? Nevashno is an artist. He lives only for his work. To ignore it, to dismiss it, as Pilaf did, that is the insult. Nevajno so hurt with Pilaf, he never even asked him to change him check. After Quill's speculations about the modernist, this was distinctly interesting. Was Nevajno in the theatre on the night of the suicide? Mais pourquoi pas? Oh, the company it was there. Anton and Pavel, they share a dressing room then, he remembered. But it was not a success. Was the personnel of your company the same in Paris as in London? Absolument, said Stroganoff with pride. My company, they never leave me. I am to them like a father. Sometimes, he admitted reluctantly, there is a little exception. But then, children, they sometimes quarrel and leave their fathers too. But my principals, they never go, not even to Buttonhook. Especially, he added naively, now that I shall be able to pay them. And that reminds me. He dialed. I desire, he said, Monsieur Johns. Is this Monsieur Johns? Good morning. I am Stroganoff. You remember me without doubt? My shares, they feel well, no? No? He repeated, startled. Tiens, c'est curieux. Still, it can't be serious. Doubtless they will get up soon. Maybe it's a good idea to buy some more, no? But, mon ami, you are too cautious. Do you not realize that to make money you must risk something? But the broker appeared to be adamant, and after some further protests, Stroganoff hung up. Oh, he advised me to sell, he confided indignantly. What do you think of that? If I sell today, I lose already £50. You do not consider, said Quill, trying hard to bring him back to the point, that Pilaf did not commit suicide, that he was murdered. Stroganoff did not seem interested. Ah, perhaps, but that was a long time ago and in Paris, so why you worry me? I must worry for a Petrushka for Wednesday week. And carefully folding the Daily Distraught of Petunia Patch's crumpled clown article, he strode off to drop it carelessly in Smitsky's dressing room. Quill let him go. There was no help to be got out of Stroganoff this morning. Only one person in the company could be relied upon to remember the details of a 3-month-old death, and that was Stanley. Quill set off to find him. Stanley, found, had forgotten nothing. There was not a single detail of his sojourn in Paris that he did not remember and attempt to retail, including an irrelevant story of an expensive adventure of incredible purity in the foyer of the Folies Bergère. As to the death of Pilaf, Stanley's chief emotion seemed to be one of irritation at the Sûreté who had not allowed him to help. He himself had never been satisfied with the suicide verdict. Not that he particularly suspected anyone, but he had been given no chance to investigate. I tell you what, said Stanley, tapping Quill's chest impressively. I've come to a conclusion. There's a murderer in this company. No, said Quill. There's something fishy about 3 dead clowns. Stanley, too, had read Petunia Patch. Seems to me that most likely that one person did in all 3, and what's more, I have a theory as to who it is. Don't ask me about it, he went on quickly. I don't want to talk about it till I've got proof, and I hope to have proof soon. Oh, said Quill. It's dangerous, of course, but I'm used to danger. And directly I've got the evidence, I'll let you know. But, began Quill. Don't thank me, said Stanley. I'm only doing my duty as a citizen. Quill left him to his researches, in which, curiously enough, he felt no great confidence, and went out to lunch.
Episode 8. 3 dancers having died or been murdered in the same role, Inspector Quill may just have a new theory to follow.
Quill returned to the Collodium that afternoon to find the foyer besieged by balletimains, rather small balletimains with rather smart mammas. Saturday afternoons were scholars' afternoons at the Ballet Stroganoff. Quill, making his way through the bobbing sea of curls, spotted Stroganoff beamingly at anchor by the box office. In a burst of well-being, Stroganoff turned to the nearest unknown in the bobbing sea and patted its disgusted head. "Ah, so you come to see Casse-Noisette Stroganoff. Worse luck." The unknown hunched its shoulders. "What?" said the impresario, astounded. "You do not like the Casse-Noisette Stroganoff?" "No." Stroganoff tried again. "You clasp me by the leg. Next you will be telling me that you prefer Le Cinema." The unknown nodded eagerly. "Les Mickey Mouse?" inquired Stroganoff, but this, it appeared, was Sissy.
Then, says Stroganoff sagely, you will like the choreography Navajno. Très tough guy. Bien, bump off. I give you ticket if you like for Gare du Nord. But the unknown waved it scornfully aside. Defeated, Stroganoff wandered away to bestow his affability elsewhere. Quill went off to the auditorium. He made his way to Stroganoff's box, which was occupied by the Balletto Medico, gazing sulkily at the stage. He looked at Quill without seeing him, and burst into a torrent of denunciation. Quill received the invective with a nod and settled beside him. He would have been glad to escape elsewhere, but he had remembered his speculations about Navajno and wanted the opinion of the Balletto Medico concerning them. Eventually the curtain came down to much juvenile applause. "Appalling," said the Balletto Medico. "Cheer up," said Quill. "Might have been by Navajno. In which case I wouldn't be here." "You don't like Navajno?" "He's mad." The Balletto Medico dismissed him from the conversation, but Quill brought him back. "Mad enough to be certified?" "Absolutely, if only," said the Balletto Medico wistfully. "I had a ballet-loving colleague. I'd see to it myself. Anything to stop the fellow." "But who then would dance the Moor on Wednesday week before Benoit himself if he come?" quoted Quill glibly. The Stroganoff touch awoke the Balletto Medico to Quill's presence. "Oh, it's you," he said in some relief. "I thought it was Stanley." Quill laughed. "He's busy finding the murderer for me." "Talking of the murderer," said the Balletto Medico with interest, "I've come to a conclusion that I rather admire the fellow. He hasn't killed a good dancer yet. The man has taste. I wish he'd exercise it more often." "He very likely will." "Hope so," said the Balletto Medico blandly. "You know," he confided, "I sympathise with him to some extent. I've often felt like murdering Anton Palouk myself after one of his triumphal appearances. And as for killing Pavel before he could lay hands on Petrushka, why, it was nothing but the action of a public benefactor." "Am I to take it," asked Quill, "that you believe the Petrushkas were killed because they danced badly?" The Balletto Medico sighed. "Oh, I wish I could believe it. It's the sort of censorship the Ballet Stroganoff needs." Quill took the plunge. "It is one of the police theories that these murders might be the work of a madman." The Balletto Medico saw the point. "You mean there's someone who the sight of a Petrushka prompts to homicide?" "Perhaps. Might be something in it," said the Balletto Medico thoughtfully. "I had a patient once who felt that way about crooners, but then his wife had eloped with one." Quill remembered the boutiques. A ballet dancer would hardly mind that. "Agreed," said the Balletto Medico. "On the other hand, they can work themselves into passions over matters that to the tennis club minder are utterly without importance." "I've noticed that," said Quill. "Take Navajno, for instance. You can't insult the fella in a normal manner. Call him every name under the sun, sleep with his mistress, or slap his face, and the chances are that he won't even notice it. But any slight, real or imaginary, on his work brings him foaming to his feet." "He must be pretty active when you're about," Quill laughed, and proceeded to take advantage of the opening. He explained his suspicions, said he was planning to interview Navajno the next morning, and pointing out that whilst the police surgeon knew a lot about insanity, he knew nothing about ballet dancers, and might easily be confused by the somewhat similar symptoms, begged the Balletto Medico to accompany him. The latter jibbed a bit, protesting that he had had an appointment, that he was not speaking to Navajno, and that anyway Navajno lacked the taste to have done the murders, but Quill insisted. They wrangled through 2 acts, and it was not until the final curtain of Casse-Noisette that the Balletto Medico capitulated. They fixed a rendezvous for the following morning. Then Quill went off to see Stroganoff, who was talking to Stanley. "Go away," he said. But it appeared that this is what Stanley wanted. He'd come to ask for the evening off. "Impossible," said Stroganoff promptly. "Who then will lead the applause in the upper circle?" "Well, doesn't the upper circle applaud for itself?" asked Quill. This seemed a new angle on stage life. "For the ballet at Navajno, no," said Stroganoff. "And tonight we give Gare du Nord, and Navajno, he is sensitive to les salons." "But," said Stanley, "I promised to help the police, and I want time off to follow up a most important clue." Stroganoff looked at Quill incredulously. "You have asked Stanley to help?" "He's offered," said Quill tactfully. Stroganoff shrugged. In that case, I give Stanley the permit, and Appelsine he can go and shout bis instead. Not Appelsine, said Stanley, panic-stricken. Quill suppressed a smile. So, this was Stanley's suspect. Stroganoff, too, had divined the situation. You come here to tell me that you suspect my Appelsine? I'm revealing nothing for the moment, said Stanley, the Sphinx. But you have revealed. Appelsine to murder Pavel? Poof! Stranger things have been known, said Stanley, darkly. All right, said Stroganoff. He had tired of this unprofitable discussion. And meanwhile you get out, no? That night Quill sat in his room, reading with a certain amount of jealousy about an obnoxiously successful French detective and avoiding night starvation on the rather unsatisfactory gas cooker provided by Miss Treacle. It was past midnight, and Quill was pleasantly tired. The evening at the theatre had been as uneventful as any evening containing a performance and diversion as Gare du Nord could be. Quill himself had been completely bewildered by the snarling locomotive that sprawled right across the back cloth, the weirdly dressed and unusually agile porters, the boiling of noises in the orchestra pit, and the station master, the choreographer himself, who spent all his time dancing with the more attractive passengers. The action was explained in the programme, but it did not help Quill much to be told that the station was the universe, the train fate, and the passengers the nobler emotions of the human soul, such as hatred, jealousy, vanity, and greed. Nevertheless, a part of the audience had seemed to like the ballet. Many of them were on their feet shouting "Brava!" "Superb!" and even "Nevajno," but another fraction, led by the Balletto Medico, sat back in their seats and talked contemptuously of design, dynamic, rhythm, plastic values, grouping, and line. Nevajno had made a speech containing a number of jibes and some dark allusions of a new and even more revolutionary work on which he was at present engaged. Listening to him, Quill had found himself anticipating tomorrow's interview with a certain amount of apprehension. The French detective in Quill's book was just expatiating on psychology to an audience born to be admiring, when a knock on the door, which somehow managed to combine fury and prudery in equal proportions, brought him to his feet. Miss Treacle, her flannel dressing gown, a raw pink, tasselled firmly round her waist, her hair braided for the night, gave tongue. "A lady to see you." The brevity of the sentence was more than compensated for by her expression. A horrid vision of Arienskaya, an abandoned Russian gypsy dropping feverish cigarette ends on Miss Treacle's carpet, floated before Quill's eyes. "Show her up," he said, resigned. "That I won't do," said Miss Treacle firmly. "Really, Mr. Quill, I'm surprised at you. My house has always been respectable. You'll see her downstairs in my drawing-room. The fire's gone out, but I can't help that." A week ago, Quill would have descended meekly to shiver in front of Miss Treacle's sister's wedding group, but now he had been infected with some of the buoyancy of the ballet Stroganoff. He was damned if he was going to catch cold to please Miss Treacle's furious sense of propriety. "You will show her up here," he said firmly. Miss Treacle tightened the tassel of her dressing-gown. "Never under my roof." "In that case," said Quill affably, "there'll be a spare room under it next week." "This room," he elaborated. "Are you giving me notice to vacate?" "Yes." Miss Treacle seemed about to snap an acceptance, but stopped short. "Never late with the rent. Never quibbles about extras. Hardly ever in. Anyone else would certainly insist on having the room repapered." "Is the lady a relative?" she asked charitably, offering a loophole. My grandmother," said Quill. "That," said Miss Treacle, allowing no trace of incredulity to appear on her features, "is different." She stalked out and returned to usher in Rubinska. "Thank you, Miss Treacle," said Quill. "Not at all, Mr. Quill." The door snapped to, but not before a scornful "grandmother" had floated through it. Rubinska was clearly labouring under some emotion. She crossed impulsively to Quill, snatched at his hand, and gazed at him with large, pleading eyes. She was altogether adorable. "You must promise me something." "Of course," said Quill. In his relief that she was not Arienskaya, he was willing to promise anything. "You must arrest Kasia Ranievsky at once." Quill began to revise his views about promises. Why? "To save his life." Don't you understand, said Rubinska impatiently. Nothing short of an arrest will stop him dancing Petrushka, and then he'll be killed. Has Stroganoff offered him the part? Not yet, but he's going to. I know he's going to. Everybody says so. But surely, said Quill, if you feel that way, you can persuade him to refuse. I've tried, said Rubinska. I've been trying all evening. But Kasha's too ambitious. He laughs at the danger. He even says there is no danger, and there is, isn't there? There may be, Quill was forced to admit. Then you must arrest him. Quill led her to a chair and fed her a cigarette. Now take it calmly, he said. You must realise for yourself that I can't take Kasha into protective custody on the strength of a superstition. Then you must order Stroganoff to give another ballet. Quill explained patiently that Scotland Yard could hardly order the cancellation of a ballet on the grounds that somebody might be murdered in it. They could not afford to advertise their incapacity in this manner. Then you will do nothing? Quill said every precaution would be taken. Plainclothes men would surround the stage. He was even toying with the idea of introducing some of his men into the crowd scenes. The killer, even assuming he would be at work again, would undoubtedly be caught afterwards. But first, said Rubinska, he'll kill my Kasha. Quill sighed. Your Kasha. A quaking hand knocked at the door, and an agitated finger drew Quill into the passage. There's a young man downstairs, hissed Miss Treacle. He's followed her. This is terrible. What shall we do? Show him up, said Quill. No, said Miss Treacle. I will not have bloodshed in my house. Oh, confide in me, Mr. Quill. Is he her husband? He's going to be, said Quill comfortingly. I knew it. Well, Miss Treacle, look out, she added, as the beaming face of Kasha came running upstairs. She is not left yet? Kasha inquired. She's gone, lied Miss Treacle, game to the last. Gone? She's here, said Quill. It's all right, he explained to Miss Treacle. We're not going to kill each other. This, he could not help adding, is my grandfather. Panic left Miss Treacle. She tightened her tassel and bade them an acid good night. Kasha followed Quill into the room and embraced Rubinska affectionately. So she hasn't persuaded you to arrest me? He grinned. Not quite, said Quill. All the same, he added, why don't you do what she asks and refuse the role? It hasn't been offered to me yet, said Kasha. If it is, I shall certainly take it. I've always longed to dance Petrushka. Rubinska moaned. But you'll be killed. Why should I be killed? The girl here, he explained to Quill, seems to think that there's some lunatic at large killing off every Petrushka in sight. She might even be right, said Quill gravely. Even if she is, said Kasha obstinately, I'm still taking the role if I get the chance. I'd be a fool to miss the opportunity. An opportunity you would never have had, but for the murders, Quill pointed out. Kasha nodded. Oh, from that point of view, I'm grateful to the murderers. I'd almost commit murder myself to dance that role. Rubinska shrugged. Oh, you see, he's hopeless. Absolutely hopeless, agreed Kasha. But don't worry. If I get the role, Mr. Quill here will see to it that I'm not killed. I'll do my best, said Quill. My reputation won't stand a third murder.
Episode 9. With the gala performance of the Jinx ballet Petrushka fast approaching, all eyes are on whom will be offered the fated role next.
For the London season, Navagno had installed himself in a semi-detached studio in Bloomsbury. Quill and the Ballet-Medico, reaching the Mews at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, had no difficulty in finding it. A scowling garage proprietor led them to a door through which an alarming fanfanade of discords was penetrating, and callously left them to their fate. Prokofiev, said the Ballet-Medico. Quill knocked, but realizing immediately that this was a mere waste of time, entered. Deep in an armchair, screened by a cloud of smoke, Navagno was listening entranced to his portable gramophone. He was wearing a high-necked Russian blouse of luxurious plum velvet, flannel bags and camel hair bedroom slippers. He waved a vague welcome at his visitors. Sit down, he said. Listen. The balletto-medico made himself comfortable on the wicker basket that had once belonged to Stroganoff. Quill selected the collective works of Proust. They listened while the record screeched itself to a close, and it was not until Navashno showed every sign of putting on the other side that Quill intervened. "Ah," he began. "Later," said Navashno. "First we must listen to this." "It is to this music," he announced, "that I had the idea magnificent for a ballet." The balletto-medico moved restlessly. "It is called," said Navashno, oblivious, "Table d'Eau." He started the record. "The action, it takes place in a restaurant. The backcloth is a bill of fare. I compose it later. It is decided only that it will be symbolic." The balletto-medico moved restlessly. "It is called," said Navashno, oblivious, "Table d'Eau." He started the record. "The action, it takes place in a restaurant. The backcloth, it is a bill of fare. I compose it later. It is decided only that it will be symbolic." "And that," said Quill ingratiatingly, as a succession of crunching sound ruined the morning sunshine, "is the heavy-footed waiters shuffling?" "On the contrary," said Navashno. "That is the celery." Quill subsided, but the balletto-medico took action. He crossed the gramophone and stopped it. Navashno looked at him like a hurt child. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "I've heard enough," said the balletto-medico. "I'm sick of your universal eaters." "But they are symbolic." Absently, Navashno picked up Quill's cigarette, lit his own, and tossed the detective's carelessly into the waste-paper basket. "Appetites," he explained, "are universal. Man is hungry for food. The nations, they are hungry for territory." "Appetites," said the balletto-medico, "are not balletic." The yell of rage that Navashno let forth told Quill that it was time for him to intervene. He'd come here to discover if the genius was mad, not to goad him into it. "I enjoyed your Gare du Nord very much," he said placatingly. "You enjoyed it?" said Navashno, livid. "This ballet that should shake you to the very soul, this ballet that is in an abyss of all suffering, that is black with the despair of the world and the futility of endeavour, you enjoy it?" "Very much," said Quill. "No doubt," said Navashno cuttingly, "you enjoy also Sylphide and Petrushka." "Ah, they're real ballets," said the balletto-medico gloatingly. "Though not, of course," he added, as performed by the Stroganoff Company." Another scream of rage came from the doorway. It was Stroganoff, almost dropping the package he was carrying in his fury. "That," he said, "is the libel. It is also not true." "It is the last privilege that you shall have from me," retorted Stroganoff. "From now on you pay for your seat, and I see to it myself that they put you behind pillar. Still," he resumed, "it is not to debate with the quacks that I have come to see you this morning." Navashno was immediately on the defensive. "If it concerns that cheque you change for me." "Mais non, mon cher," said Stroganoff. "That is all right." "All right," echoed Navashno incredulously. "The bank, they have paid." "Doubtless they will do it shortly," said Stroganoff consolingly. "And if not, poof, it matters nothing. We are artists, you and me, and not doctors." But Navashno still looked puzzled. "Look," said Stroganoff, getting busy with his parcels. "I bring you little present. Foie gras." He deposited the package on the table. "Champagne." He produced 2 magnums, and a little caviar to tempt the appetite. Navashno circled the display warily. "Why you bring me this?" "It is the compliment from one artist to another." Navashno brooded. To Quill it seemed that something was preying on his mind. "You change me small cheque?" he asked in his grimmest voice. Stroganoff gulped a little, but rallied. "Assurément," he said. Navashno struck the table with his fist. "Assassin!" he roared. "Mais non!" said Stroganoff. "Mais si!" bellowed Navashno. "All is now clear. I understand everything. All this champagne, all this artist to artist, it is to murder me. Do you deny that it is to ask me to dance Petrushka that you have come here?" Stroganoff sat down on the pile of suitcases. It was clear from his expression that Navashno had guessed correctly. "There is no danger," he said coaxingly, "and as Petrushka you will be superb." "I should not be superb," said Navashno. "It is a role I do not covet. The ballet, it is old-fashioned, and the symbolism, it is for the children." Stroganoff still pleaded. "If you dance for me, I produce for you the ballet of 1,000,000 shirts." "Not the shirts," said Navashno petulantly. "That was last week. Now I work on new idea. Table d'hôte. It is magnificent. I will play the music now." Said Quill. "Not again," said the balletto-medico. "Later," said Stroganoff. "You dance Petrushka, and I produce that too." "What will it benefit me if I am dead?" asked Navashno. Stroganoff switched his attack to a new angle. To die for your art is the greatest thing of all. Navajno nodded. There I agree. To die for Gardiner, that is the death glorious. But to die for Petrushka, that is merely silly. In that case, said Stroganoff nastily, I take out the cheque from your salary. Also I take back this caviar to give to Kasha. You can take your champagne too, said Navajno defiantly, and all your friends with you. I desire to work. But before Stroganoff could collect his bottles, there was an ecstatic shrill from the door. Champagne! Arienskaya hurried in. What is it that we celebrate? Boutique too had reached the table and was examining the bottles lovingly. Moe Chandon, he announced happily. It is my favourite. Where are the glasses? Demanded Arienskaya, always practical. There aren't any, Quill prophesied. He was right, but the Balletto Medico came forward with a quantity of cups. Puchik opened the bottle. To what? Repeated Arienskaya, passing up her cup for a second helping. To what is it you said we drink? We drink to nothing, exploded Stroganoff, who had been watching the performance with growing irritation. We just drink, that is all. And now I have no champagne left to take to Kasha. Oh, it is his birthday? Asked Arienska, interested. No, said the Balletto Medico, rushing in. It's the Stroganoff idea of a Petrushka. He will not need coaxing, that one, said Stroganoff, looking meaningly at Navajno. He put his art before everything. Puchik looked depressed. He is very young to die, he said sadly. The bland assumption by everybody that the next Petrushka would die as a matter of course wounded Quill's professional pride. The police have the situation well under control, he said. He will die, stated Puchik, unimpressed. That poor young man. Arienskaya crossed to Quill. He must not die, she said earnestly. He is a dancer of great promise. So you must guard him with your life, or else the little Rubinska, she will claw your eyes out. The waste paper basket burst into flames. They were all mad, decided Quill drearily. One as mad as the other. On Monday, Kasha had caviar for breakfast. He was not very fond of caviar for breakfast, and he did not grudge the 3 reporters who kept in company their share. The Monday press had found its hero. Kasha Ranievsky was news. New star to dance Petrushka, said the early editions. Kasha Ranievsky to challenge death. Young dancer in fatal role. By lunchtime, Kasha was startled to find that he had given a special interview to the Daily Distraught. My art, he had apparently told Petunia Patch, it is to me everything. The ballet Stroganoff, it is like a father. Vladimir Stroganoff is a wonderful man. The source of this message was easy for Quill to divine. When he ran into Stroganoff during his barren plodding around the theatre that afternoon, the latter not only admitted it, but went so far as to complain of the cutting. They do not print my picture, he said peevishly. Evening found Kasha under contract to write the story of his life, loves and art, with a prudent clause appointing an experienced executor to complete the work in the event of premature death. Quill was dreading tomorrow night's gala. The Snarl was dreading it too. All Scotland Yard was jumpy. Wednesday might have been the morning of an execution, except that Kasha was not permitted to choose his own breakfast. This had to be fixed in time for the country editions. Every step he took during that day was fully reported. On the whole, Kasha stood up manfully to his ordeal. He dealt smilingly with the reporters. He shoved his enormously increased mail onto Stanley. He made friends with the plainclothes men who surrounded his rehearsals. But even he blenched slightly at the nudgings and whisperings that arose from the queue that had waited all night as he entered the stage door on the afternoon of the final rehearsal for the gala performance that night. In the theatre, all was frenzy. Crash! One of the balconies had collapsed. It had never been designed for 10 stalwart policemen and as many of the cast as could crowd themselves into this exciting vicinity. Sergeant Banner disentangled himself from the wreckage, adjusted a Russian beard and ambled embarrassed over to Quill. "How do I look?" he demanded with diffident pride. "Awful," said Quill candidly, and wandered off to be collared by Arienskaya. "It is hopeless," she shrilled. "You take them away immediately. Your policemen, they ruin my ballet. They will not mingle." Quill protested, "But they only have to walk about." "Mais mon Dieu," said Arienskaya, "it is how they walk. Have you seen them? Well, of course, they're not trained dancers. That I realize, said Arienskaya. The audience, they will realize it too. They march like soldiers. It is a sight to break the art. Better far that Casher should die than Benoit should see such an atrocity. The balcony had been bolstered up again, and such of the company as could be cajoled were clambering onto it. Storms were brewing everywhere. Always temperamental, the Stroganoff company had reached the pitch of nervous frenzy. The plainclothes men stood dazed, helpless breakwaters in a sea of emotion. Only Casher was calm, the fatalistic calm of the Slav, as Petunia Patch was at that moment phoning her office. Engulfed in his magician's robe, Putik sat in the wings practising his flute. He need only pretend to play it at the performance, but he was by nature thorough. "They have permitted me to dance the magician," he told Quill with pride. "It is a small role, but important. And after Casher die, doubtless I dance Petrushka." Down the centre aisle stalked tragedy, bald-headed tragedy, face masked in gloom, every gesture a fresh despair. Alarmed, Quill hastened to its side. "What's up?" "Shh," said Stroganoff, and led him out of earshot of the reporters. "Oh, I am desolate," he confided. "Benoit, he does not come." "Hard luck," said Quill. "Still, the house will be packed." "You misunderstand me," said Stroganoff. "It is not for finance that I weep. The finance, it is beautiful. It is the blow at my prestige that burn me up. When there is a gala, there must be an invité d'honneur. It is too late now to get Shylock in. It will have to be Lord Buttonhook. He is no artist. Always he ring the telephone." "Still," said Quill, "the audience come to see the ballet and not Buttonhook." Fresh despair seized Stroganoff. "And what has the ballet Stroganoff to show them? Policeman!" "The very good policeman," said Quill, a little hurt. "Oh, do not console me, mon ami," said Stroganoff. "I am resigned." He looked at the stage, where an intellectual Moor, Nevajno, was condescending to chase Petrushka, and brightened slightly. "Casher, he danced well, no?" "He is superb." Arienskaya joined the party. "He will be the best Petrushka the ballet Stroganoff has seen." Stroganoff was impressed. It was seldom that Arienskaya praised. "That is your opinion?" "Have I not said so?" The prospect of at last possessing a first-class dancer banished everything else from Stroganoff's mind. "There are not enough police on the stage," he finished abruptly. "My Kasha, he must be well protected. Bring plenty more." "Mais no," countermanded Arienska. "You will remove half of these. I myself shall go on to the stage to watch over Kasha. I think," she said, ruminatively, "I dance the gypsy." "Oi," said Stroganoff, "it will tire you, and I cannot have my beautiful tire herself." Arienskaya's face set in familiar lines. "I insist." Quill fled. Outside the theatre, a newsboy waved a paper at him. Petunia Patch was at it again. "This afternoon, the last rehearsal of Petrushka, the death ballet, was held behind locked doors in the Collodium Theatre. The ballet's tragic triangle were mute. The little Rubinska, the doll, her small pale face and great tragic eyes pleading with death. The more that intelligent young choreographer Nevajno, almost unnaturally composed. And Kasha Ranievsky, the apex of attention, Petrushka, calamity's clown, calm with the fortitude of the true artist, looking death unflinchingly in the face and daring it to strike. Detective Inspector Quill was well in evidence. The tall Adonis of Scotland Yard has turned up to station a detachment of eager young constables recalled from our pedestrian crossings to guard over Kasha on the famous set. Quill thrust the paper into his pocket impatiently. He looked incuriously at the waiting queues. Then he looked again. Somewhere he had seen those faces before, that despondency lit by a hungry gleam. Suddenly he remembered. It was outside the Old Bailey. They were here to see a murder.
Episode 10. All is prepared for the gala performance of the Stroganoff Ballet Company. But will there be yet another murder during Petrushka?
There was an ugly undercurrent in the house that night. It whispered through the stalls, murmured through the dress circle, and broke into open speculation in the gallery. There were many in the audience who'd never seen a ballet before, but then neither had they ever seen anybody murdered, and they were cheerfully willing to submit to the first in the hope of the second. Their eagerness contrasted sharply with the anxiety of the regular ballettermains. The latter all had the air of having been drawn to the theatre almost against their will. There was none of the frantic discussion, the keen dissension, and the brittle cooing of friendly enemies that characterises the more normal evenings of ballet. They looked uneasily at each other or shuddered their mutual disgust, as some sensation lover found temporary diversion in gazing at them. Even the programme girls were in a state of tension. Nobody bought chocolates. At 8:20, Lord Buttonhook arrived, alighting from his Rolls-Royce, an ermine on one arm, a sable on the other, beside him a secretary. They swept grandly past the welcoming Stanley and established themselves in the royal box. A moment later, the secretary was phoning the office on the apparatus that had been specially installed that afternoon. He was telling them that nothing had happened yet. Stroganoff wandered in, made a vague speech of welcome. "It is a great pleasure you come, but Benoit, he would have been better," and wandered out again. "Oh, what a sweet old man," said the ermine. "Poof," said the sable, in unconscious plagiarism. Meanwhile, the Old Bailey portion of the audience had found to their disgust that Petrushka was not the only item on the programme. Before the murderer could reasonably be expected to get busy, they'd have to sit through 2 ballets. Mournfully, they studied their programmes. Lysel Fides, a choreographic poem in the form of a reverie. What was all this? The lights were lowered. Voltaire rapped sharply with his baton on the conductor's desk. The curtain was a dark stain screening the stage. The reassuring notes of Chopin floated out of the house. The ballet-goers relaxed. Nothing could really be wrong with a world where they danced Sylphide. "Pretty," said an Old Bailey knight approvingly as the curtain went up, but halfway through he got restless. It was not a good performance of Sylphide. The movements were jerked, the soft lines turned to angles. It was danced by a cast that were afraid. The moonlit glade was oppressed with a general anxiety. Nobody was really sorry when the curtain swished down for the usual polite applause. Buttonhook's secretary was on the phone. The news editor was sharp. Would they kindly refrain from disturbing him until something had happened? The alternative story was already set up anyway. To Quill, the interval seemed endless. He wandered unhappily backstage, smiled wanly at Navajno's frantic direction to the scene shifters, evaded Arienskaya with a practised neatness, exchanged a few reassuring words with his men, and wandered back into the auditorium. Ajax, an allegoric fantasy in 1 act, choreography by Navajno. The Old Baileyite suffered patiently as Ajax leapt his defiance over the miscellaneous collection of rocks. There seemed a sporting chance that he might stumble over one of them and break his neck. In his dressing room, Kasia sat talking to Rubinska. The sympathetic Sergeant Banner on guard pretended not to listen. Kasia was making an effort to appear light-hearted. Rubinska had given up pleading. She, too, was calling on her. Courage. They were arguing about their wedding. Kasia was stating firmly that nothing would induce him to invite Petunia Patch. Rubinska said nothing would persuade her mother not to. Stroganoff's shining dome bobbed round the door. "You are ready, no?" Together, Stroganoff and his 2 children wandered arm in arm down the corridor. For once, Volti Subito was watching the stage. The music fell keenly on the ear. The noises of the fair bore an added message of excitement tonight. The shifting and drifting of the crowd began. As they passed, they eyed each other warily. So many extras on the stage tonight, so many possible killers. The street dancers went through their routine. They were keyed up. The crowd caught something of their excitement. This was a real performance at Petrushka that the Ballet Stroganoff was giving. The Old Bailey-goers shifted restlessly. "Is that him?" they asked, every time a fresh dancer appeared in the centre of the stage. Engulfed in his magician's robe, Putik bobbed out between the curtains at the puppet booth. "The magician," explained an assiduous programme reader in the upper circle.
The magician piped his wily tune. The curtains parted, the puppets lolled inanimate in their cells, the doll eager in her stillness, the Moor lackadaisical, and Petrushka, his face so quiet it might have been a mask. "They are all dead." The all-night wait had proved too much for someone in the gallery. Beep, beep. The Moor came jerkily to life. Beep, beep. The doll was on her points. Beep, beep. The malevolent magic twitched Petrushka to his feet. A sigh of relief came from Quill. The old Baileyites, on the other hand, felt mildly cheated to find Petrushka still alive. However, there was plenty of time yet, they reflected. 3 more scenes, 3 more chances. "God, he's dancing well," murmured the balletto medico, peering round his pillar. Casher was inspired. He was dancing with the wild abandon of the dupe who was not master of himself, who twitched to order in a dictated frenzy he had no power to subdue. Through him the doll became something more than the controlled mistress of her feet, and even the Moor lost his detachment and acquired something of the clownish savagery of Fokeen's conception. The applause as the curtain came down was terrific. The house had almost been trapped into forgetting the impending murder. A dominant hand pushed Petrushka into his cell. He was quivering, but still alive. He hammered the walls of his personal hell, mouthing his misery at the image of the magician above him. His arms move, but they are only sawdust. His legs support him, but they are not real. His feet are but 2 black rag bobs. His heart loves the doll, but it does not beat. Casher was a poignant as well as a passionate Petrushka. The lines of his agony were painted on his face. The feeling of his agony weighed every gesture. His hysterical welcome the doll startled even Lord Buttonhook into a shudder. Terrified, the doll fled from Petrushka's clumsy embrace. "Épertant," said Arienskaya. "Terrifique," said Stroganoff. The scene between the Moor and the doll was almost a relief. The old Baileyites laughed at the Moor's antics with his coconut. By dint of persuading himself that this was symbolic, Nevajno was putting up quite a creditable performance. The humours of the pas de deux went across with a bang. Here were 2 characters straight out of a comic strip. But into their laughter cut the scream of Petrushka. "He can conduct that one when he wants," said Stroganoff approvingly. In a white rage of jealousy, Petrushka leapt at the pair on the sofa. The Moor sprang up, the rivals clinched in a rough and tumble. The doll fainted ballet-wise on the sofa, one leg in the air. In the wings stood the magician. He was almost in tears. Back to the fair. The rhythm in the orchestra heightened, the rhythm on the stage quickened, the music lashed at the excited crowd. A pair of dancing gypsies took the centre of the stage. Neither of them was Arienskaya, for she had lost an argument. They danced, a band of nursemaids fluttered their handkerchiefs, the bear lurched ominously across the stage, the coachmen flung themselves wildly into a Russian dance, and everywhere carnival figures jerked their grotesque heads. Snowflakes fell softly on the whirling crowds. The audience was deadly still. At the back of each balcony stood a cluster of policemen watching. A tremor passed through the curtains of the puppet booth. Their folds blew out. The orchestra screamed. The puppets leapt onto the stage. Round and round leapt Petrushka. Faster, faster came the Moor's scimitar in hand. Faster, faster, until at last the scimitar cut through the air, and Petrushka lay stretched on the ground. Horrified, the crowd edged close. The piping voice of Petrushka mouthed its pathetic farewell. "Date?" asked the man in the upper circle as the crowd screened the figure from sight. They sent for the magician. He came to lift the sawdust effigy from the spot where Petrushka had died. Reassured, the crowd drifted off, leaving the old man trailing his rag puppet across the ground. High on its booth, the spirit of Petrushka arose, screaming defiance of a tortured world. Now, a dozen backs straightened in their seats. Something was wrong with the magician. His mouth was working. He reeled as though the strength had gone from his legs. Something fell from his hand and clattered
onto the stage. "It is no use," said Boutique pathetically. "I cannot shoot him. He danced too well." Lord Buttonhook strode from the theatre, a disappointed man. Letter from Vladimir Stroganoff to Detective Inspector Adam Quill from the Grand Hotel de la Bazouche in May. Mon cher Monsieur Quill, how are you? This is to tell you that the Ballet Stroganoff will soon be in your lovely England once more, doubtless for a season even more triumphant than the last. Alas, that we could not secure Covent Garden, but that is for another year. With us all is well. Kasia and Rubinska, they are long time married. They dance better every day. But me, I do not tell them this, lest their mother ask for bigger contracts. Volti, he is the reformed character. He always watched the stage now. No one is dead since London. We are bringing with us a new ballet by Nivashno. It is called Civilization. It is symbolic. There is a scene where the corps de ballet is shot with a machine gun. London will be shaken. And now, mon cher, I want to ask you one big favour. It concerns my poor Boutique. I know, monsieur, that you do not feel so warm towards the old one as I do. I know that he gives you a lot of trouble and much anxiety. But remember, Monsieur Quill, he is not le vrai assassin. He killed for his art. Petrushka, it was to him his life. He was with Fouquin when he invented it. To see it dance bad was more than he could bear. And then he had the delusion. Always he saw himself young, his wife beautiful. It was natural that he should come to think that he alone in the Ballet Stroganoff could bring to the role all that is demanded. We in the Stroganoff company knew this. Well, never were we unkind to the old man when he asked for the part. They might have told me, reflected Quill, a trifle bitterly. Often I reproach myself that I did not do as he asked, but no, it was impossible. And poor Boutique, he thinks that I am blind, obdurate. So he decided all who dance Petrushka shall die, until in the end only he is left to take the role. It is a situation bien ridicule. But poor Boutique, he reasoned that to kill for his art, it is not crime. First he killed Pilaf in Paris, but we all think it is suicide. Then he stay up on the opposite balcony and shoot Anton, and still we do not suspect him. Even you, Mr. Quill, who are trying to catch assassins, do not suspect. And still the old one, he do not get his role. So he say to himself, this Pavel, he is a dancer mediocre. Good to support the ballerina, but he is not the fire for Petrushka. It is a crime against art that he dance it. Poof, I kill him before he can begin. And that, Monsieur Quill, is why he shoot Pavel in his booth. And then he decide to kill my Kasia. Petrushka, it is not for the experience. Petrushka, he bear the whole philosophy of life. But when the time come, Kasia has danced the role well. The old man is a connoisseur. He sees the role is safe in the ballet, while Kasia, he is with us. For himself, he cares no more, and so he does not shoot. You will understand now, Monsieur Quill, that it is not an assassin, but an artist that you have put in that pretty home in Sussex. They tell me he is happy. He write often to Arienskaya. All the time the ballet it goes on in his mind, and often he dance Petrushka to the other guests. You will do me the favour, Monsieur Quill, if you go down to prepare my Boutique for our coming. He will no doubt give you the welcome royal. Always he speak kindly of you in his letters. Tell him that we will come and see him often, and that the Ballet Stroganoff, it still go on. Mille remerciements. Gardez-vous bien. V. Stroganoff. Rubinska sends her love. With a sigh, Quill put away the letter and returned to his notes of the case on which he was engaged. Somehow it was difficult to work up a real enthusiasm over the fate of a vanished laundry van.
You have been listening to A Bullet in the Ballet by Caryl Brahms and S.J. Simon, abridged in 10 episodes and read by David Rumelle.
The announcements and episode resumes were read by Mr. Marc Sinclair. A Bullet in the Ballet was first published in 1937.